In this video, we're going through 3 hours of unresolved SpongeBob lore that'll keep your brain turning while you drift off. Let's get started. First up, we got the hash-slinging slasher and the Nosferatu problem. In the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, there are 2 episodes that share a strange connection through one mysterious character and a series of unexplained supernatural events. These episodes are Graveyard Shift from Season 2 and The Night Patty from Season 11, and both feature Nosferatu, a classic movie vampire who appears under circumstances that make no sense in the underwater world of Bikini Bottom. The question that has puzzled fans for years is simple but impossible to answer with certainty. What is actually real and what is fake in these 2 episodes? And why does a famous vampire from silent films exist as a character in this cartoon about a talking sponge? The story begins with Graveyard Shift, which aired on September 6, 2002. The episode takes place at the Krusty Krab restaurant during closing time at 8 o'clock at night. Squidward is ready to leave work when a customer named Tom shows up asking if the restaurant is still open. Squidward refuses to serve him, but the word money catches the attention of Mr. Krabs, who literally falls from the ceiling. Mr. Krabs realizes that staying open later means more money, so he tears up the close sign and announces the Krusty Krab will now be open 24 hours a day. A crowd of fish rush into the restaurant and trample over Squidward. SpongeBob is extremely excited about working all night, comparing it to a sleepover, except they will be sweaty and covered with grease. Squidward is miserable and even hands a customer a baseball bat, asking to be hit as hard as possible. Throughout the early part of the night shift, SpongeBob keeps bothering Squidward by announcing every task he does by adding the words "at night" to the end of his sentences. He sings a repetitive song about night that drives Squidward crazy. Eventually, Squidward tells SpongeBob to take out the trash to get a moment of peace. SpongeBob becomes nervous when he realizes the dumpster is outside in the dark. He runs outside screaming and panicking, then returns breathing heavily. Squidward asks if SpongeBob is afraid, and when SpongeBob says no, Squidward decides to have some fun by scaring him. He tells SpongeBob that he is afraid, especially after what happened. SpongeBob begs Squidward to tell him what he means. Squidward pretends to be reluctant before asking if SpongeBob has ever heard the story of the hash-slinging slasher. SpongeBob gets the name wrong multiple times, calling him the slash-bringing hasher, the sash-ringing, the trash-singing, the mash-flinging, and the crash-dinging before Squidward corrects him. Squidward explains that years ago at this very restaurant, the hash-slinging slasher used to be a fry cook just like SpongeBob, except clumsier. One night when cutting patties, he accidentally cut off his own hand by mistake. SpongeBob demonstrates pulling his own arms out of their sockets and growing new ones because he is a sponge, but Squidward explains the hash-slinging slasher was not a sponge, so his hand did not grow back. The hash-slinging slasher replaced his missing hand with a rusty spatula, then got hit by a bus, and at his funeral they fired him. Squidward asks what day it is, and SpongeBob says Tuesday. Squidward explains that every Tuesday night, the ghost returns to the Krusty Krab to get his horrible revenge. Squidward tells SpongeBob there are 3 signs that signal the hash-slinging slasher's approach. First, the lights will flicker on and off. Second, the phone will ring and there will be nobody there. Third, the hash-slinging slasher will arrive in the ghost of the bus that ran him over. During this explanation, SpongeBob is shown eating his fingernails in fear, then eating his arms as they grow back. Squidward describes how the hash-slinging slasher will exit the bus, cross the street without looking both ways, because he is already dead, tap on the window with his spatula hand, open the door, and slowly approach the counter. When SpongeBob desperately asks what happens next, Squidward sneaks up behind him, taps his shoulder, and yells that he gets you. SpongeBob screams continuously for about 20 seconds while Squidward laughs. All the customers stare in confusion. Even SpongeBob's pupils start screaming. Squidward finally yells that he was joking. SpongeBob asks what he means. Squidward explains nothing in the story is true, nobody has a spatula for a hand, and it was all a joke. SpongeBob understands and starts laughing repeatedly, which annoys Squidward. The episode cuts to later in the night. Squidward complains that being open 24 hours is stupid and asks who wants a Krabby Patty at 3 in the morning. The scene immediately cuts to Patrick's bedroom where his alarm goes off at 3 a.m. Patrick says, "Oh boy, 3 a.m. and pulls a Krabby Patty from under his blanket. Back at the Krusty Krab, the lights start flickering on and off. Squidward sarcastically says, "Very funny, SpongeBob," assuming SpongeBob is messing with the lights. SpongeBob asks what Squidward is talking about. Squidward realizes nobody is touching the light switch. SpongeBob asks how Squidward is making the lights flicker without moving the switch. Squidward insists he is not doing it and decides it must be faulty wiring. Then the phone rings. Squidward picks it up and says hello 3 times, but nobody responds. SpongeBob thinks Squidward is pranking him based on the story. Squidward insists he is not doing any of this. The walls start oozing green slime, but Squidward says they always do that. Then he hears a motor sound. A bus pulls up to the Krusty Krab doors. SpongeBob says he did not know buses ran this late. Squidward says they do not. The bus pulls away and drops off a man on the opposite side of the street. All they can see is the person's spooky outline in darkness. From outside, the person lifts his spatula. Squidward screams in terror so intensely that hair grows from his head. He tries to say the name but gets it wrong. SpongeBob correctly identifies him as the hash-slinging slasher and starts crying. Squidward says they are doomed. SpongeBob says that is not why he is crying. He explains he is just so touched that Squidward Squidward would dress up as a ghostly fry cook to entertain him. Squidward tells SpongeBob there are two problems with that theory. 1, he hates SpongeBob. 2, how can that be Squidward when he is standing right here? The person taps on the door with his spatula. Both scream in terror and hold each other. The person walks through the door and approaches the counter. When he steps into the light, he is revealed to be a small green man named Richard wearing a purple coat. He asks if he can have a job application and explains he brought his own spatula. He holds it up and his sleeve rolls down to show he has both hands. Richard explains he called earlier but hung up because he was nervous. SpongeBob asks if he has references. Squidward asks an important question. If Richard was on the phone and on the bus, then who was flickering the lights? The lights flicker again. SpongeBob, Squidward, and Richard look over toward the light switch. The camera moves quickly to reveal a vampire standing next to a giant light switch on the wall. The vampire is Nosferatu, a famous character from a silent film made in 1922. All three say Nosferatu in a joking manner. Nosferatu smiles and turns the light off, ending the episode. This is where the first major mystery appears. Richard was the person who called and arrived on the bus, but the episode never explains who was flickering the lights before Nosferatu appeared. More importantly, it does not explain what Nosferatu is doing in the Krusty Krab or why a vampire from an old movie exists in Bikini Bottom. The mystery becomes even more confusing when Nosferatu appears again in the Night Patty episode from Season 11, which aired on October 21, 2018. This episode begins at Glove World Amusement Park at night. A park employee kicks SpongeBob and Patrick out because the park is closed. SpongeBob says his feet are tired and Patrick says his feet are hungry. SpongeBob sighs and says it is too bad the Krusty Krab does not stay open this late. Patrick slaps SpongeBob and points to the Krusty Krab, saying it does stay open late. SpongeBob is confused because Mr. Krabs never mentioned a night shift. They run over and enter through the doors. Inside are creepy sea creatures from rock bottom and monsters never seen before. The creatures all greet Patrick. SpongeBob is surprised Patrick is so popular. Patrick explains he comes to the night shift every single night. SpongeBob sees various strange creatures, including a blue one whose tongue laughs at him, an invisible man named Invisible Stan, and a crab-like waiter called the Matride. Patrick introduces SpongeBob to Squidabeth, who looks similar to Squidward but is much nicer. Squidabeth asks what SpongeBob wants and he requests one Krabby Patty. Squidabeth says they do not have those and pulls down a menu showing howling rings, sucker shakes, boogers, and crawly fries. Patrick orders everything. They try the food and SpongeBob says it is a little different but he likes it. SpongeBob and Patrick enter the kitchen and meet Barry Blobfish, who is cooking all the meals. SpongeBob accidentally crushes Barry's hand when shaking it. Suddenly the restaurant shakes and a train arrives, delivering a long line of customers. Barry panics about the midnight rush and wishes there was a fry cook in the house. SpongeBob shows Barry his fry cook license. Barry says he needs to clear it with the night manager. The cooler opens and Barry's boss is revealed to be Nosferatu. SpongeBob says Nosferatu's name in surprise. Nosferatu grabs SpongeBob, examines him, and sucks him dry with a straw. He gives Barry a thumbs up to approve SpongeBob. Barry gives SpongeBob the job and immediately passes out. SpongeBob starts cooking and makes regular Krabby Patties. All the creatures grab them and start eating, but then spit them all out. None of the creatures like Krabby Patties. Squidabeth asks what SpongeBob made and he explains they are Krabby Patties. She gags and asks if he is trying to poison them. The customers throw the patties at SpongeBob. While distracted pulling things from the cooler, the grill starts burning the Krabby Patties. They are reduced to ashes and turn into smoke floating in patty shapes. Squidabeth sees them and says, "Those are night patties." The creatures get excited and start eating the smoke patties. Everyone celebrates SpongeBob. A ghostly fisherman bursts through the door and robs everyone in the restaurant. SpongeBob tries to arrest him, but the fisherman hooks SpongeBob with his fishing line. SpongeBob tangles the line around tables and dumps the fisherman into the fryer, turning him into a fish stick. SpongeBob announces he captured the criminal, but the creatures yell at him. Squidabeth says the fisherman is not a criminal and works there. The creatures explain he robs them every night as a night shift tradition. SpongeBob apologizes to the fisherman, who compliments his fishing skills. The fisherman announces SpongeBob as their newest night shift member and buys everyone night patties. The scene changes to dawn when the foghorn sounds. Squidabeth announces quitting time. SpongeBob says he will miss everyone. Nosferatu joins a group hug. Squidabeth, Barry, Nosferatu, and the fishermen exit and disappear in a misty fog. Mr. Krabs appears and asks what SpongeBob is doing there so early. SpongeBob explains he was helping on the night shift. Mr. Krabs directly states they do not have a night shift and says it must have been a bad dream. SpongeBob sits down and gets poked by a fish hook in his buttocks. The scene changes into a spiraling hypnosis screen. The French narrator says, This is a case history of a fry cook who wanted a late-night snack, but ended up in the fry vat of doubt. He says Mr. Squarepants will never know he worked a shift in the tidal zone. The train runs through the tidal zone with Patrick riding in it. The episode reveals all the characters SpongeBob met were illusions created by the tidal zone, including the Patrick he was with. The episode ends with the illusionary Patrick ordering 5 night patties to go. The ending reveals the entire night shift was fake and was some kind of supernatural experience. Mr. Krabs directly states the Krusty Krab does not have a night shift. The episode strongly suggests SpongeBob was in an altered state or dimension called the tidal zone, which references the classic show The Twilight Zone. However, this creates a huge problem. If the night shift was completely fake, does that mean Nosferatu was also fake? But Nosferatu appeared in Graveyard Shift, and that episode did not suggest anything was fake or imaginary. In Graveyard Shift, Nosferatu was really there flickering the lights. SpongeBob, Squidward, and Richard all saw him at the same time, so it could not have been a dream. There is physical evidence that Nosferatu exists in Bikini Bottom, but the show never explains how or why a vampire from a silent movie lives underwater in a city full of talking fish. In Graveyard Shift, Nosferatu appears at the very end to reveal he was flickering the lights. This is treated as a joke, and the episode ends immediately. In The Night Patty, Nosferatu is the night manager with a more significant role. He examines SpongeBob before approving him for the job and joins the group hug at the end. If the night shift was fake and part of the tidal zone, then the Nosferatu in The Night Patty was also fake. But the Nosferatu in Graveyard Shift seemed to be real because multiple characters saw him with no suggestion that anything supernatural was happening beyond his mere presence. The show provides no explanation for any of this. Nosferatu is never mentioned or referenced in any other episodes. He does not speak in either episode. In Graveyard Shift, he only smiles and flickers the light switch. In The Night Patty, he gives a thumbs up and joins a group hug but never says words. The show treats his existence as completely normal and does not require any explanation. No character questions how a fictional character from a movie made in the real world in 1922 can be a real person in the SpongeBob universe. There is also the question of whether the hash-slinging slasher is real. In Graveyard Shift, Squidward completely made up the story to scare SpongeBob. Squidward admits he was joking, and none of it is true. He specifically says nobody has a spatula for a hand. However, many elements of his fake story actually happened during the episode. The lights flickered, the phone rang with nobody there, and someone arrived on a bus with a spatula. Richard was not a ghost and had both hands, so he was not the hash-slinging slasher. But the fact that so many specific details from Squidward's made-up story came true is very strange. Was it all coincidence? The episode treats it as funny coincidence, but never confirms this. The mystery becomes more complicated considering the timeline. Graveyard Shift aired in September 2002 during Season 2. The Night Patty aired in October 2018 during Season 11, 16 years later. In the show's world, characters do not age and time does not pass the same way. It is impossible to know how much time passed between episodes within the show's universe. What makes the Nosferatu mystery frustrating is that the show refuses to acknowledge anything unusual about his existence. In most stories, if a vampire appeared in an underwater city, characters would react with shock. But in SpongeBob SquarePants, nobody thinks there is anything weird about Nosferatu being there. In Graveyard Shift, SpongeBob, Squidward, and Richard all see Nosferatu and say his name together as if they recognize him. They do not seem scared or confused. In The Night Patty, Nosferatu is the boss and Patrick already knows him. SpongeBob seems surprised but does not ask why a vampire is managing a restaurant. Even though The Night Patty reveals everything was fake, this does not explain the Nosferatu from Graveyard Shift, who was definitely real. The mystery has no clear answer because the show never intended to provide one. Both episodes use Nosferatu as a joke reference to a classic horror film. The original Nosferatu film from 1922 is one of the most famous vampire movies ever made. The creators were making a reference that older viewers would recognize and find funny. The joke is that a scary vampire from an old silent film is randomly appearing in a cartoon about a talking sponge. The humor comes from how unexpected and out of place this is. The show is not trying to create a logical explanation because the whole point is that his presence makes no sense and is absurd. This is common humor in SpongeBob SquarePants, where random and illogical things happen simply because they are funny. However, this does not satisfy fans who want to understand the rules of the SpongeBob universe. If Nosferatu can exist in Bikini Bottom, what other fictional characters can also exist there? The show does not answer these questions. The Tidal Zone twist suggests supernatural or dreamlike events can occur, but it still does not explain the appearance of Nosferatu in Graveyard Shift, which was not presented as a dream. Either both appearances are real, or the night patty creates a contradiction with graveyard shift. There is no way to resolve this using only information from the episodes. The hash-slinging slasher mystery is slightly different because Squidward directly states he made up the entire story. There is no actual ghost of a fry cook who cut off his hand and replaced it with a spatula. The events that matched the story had logical explanations. Richard was the one who called and hung up because he was nervous. Richard was on the bus with a spatula because he wanted to apply for a job. Nosferatu was flickering the lights, although the episode does not explain why. Everything can be explained without needing a ghost, but the fact that so many specific details from a fake story came true during the same night is statistically very unlikely. Squidward made up the story on the spot. He could not have known someone would actually arrive on a bus with a spatula later that night. These things happening together seems too coincidental to be random chance, but the episode treats it as exactly that. The two episodes together create an unresolved mystery that the show has no interest in solving. Nosferatu appears in both episodes under different circumstances. In one episode he seems to be real, and in another he is part of a fake illusion, but this is never addressed or explained. The hash-slinging slasher is definitely fake, but the coincidences surrounding the story are never explained. Fans continue to discuss and debate these mysteries, creating theories about what Nosferatu is doing in Bikini Bottom. Some fans believe Nosferatu might actually run a real night shift that nobody knows about. Other fans think both episodes are just random humor with no deeper meaning. The truth is that SpongeBob SquarePants operates on cartoon logic, where anything can happen without needing a realistic explanation, and expecting consistent answers to these mysteries is probably missing the point of the show's absurd sense of humor. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Rock Bottom, the city that shouldn't exist. In the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, there exists a location so strange and unexplained that it appears in only one episode and is never mentioned again. This place is called Rock Bottom, and it is featured in an episode of the same name that aired on March 15, 2000. Rock Bottom is not just another location in the show's universe. It is a place that operates under completely different rules of physics, language, and logic compared to Bikini Bottom. The episode shows SpongeBob accidentally traveling to this bizarre location and struggling to escape, but the show never explains what Rock Bottom actually is, why it exists, how it functions, or why it is never referenced again, despite being one of the most memorable and unsettling locations in the entire series. The episode begins at Glove World Amusement Park, where SpongeBob and Patrick are standing outside waiting for the bus after spending the day there. SpongeBob is holding a glove-shaped balloon. When the bus arrives, SpongeBob struggles to pay the fare because he keeps accidentally hitting the bus driver with his balloon every time he turns around. The bus driver, whose name is Incidental 41, gets annoyed and eventually tells SpongeBob to forget about paying and just take his seat. SpongeBob and Patrick sit down and show each other what they got at Glove World. SpongeBob has a glove light that he puts inside his head to make his eyes flash. Patrick has gloves for his glove action figure. While they are playing with their toys, Patrick looks out the window and notices a yellow sign that says, "You are now leaving Bikini Bottom," written in red letters. Patrick asks SpongeBob where leaving Bikini Bottom is. SpongeBob asks where Patrick saw that sign. Patrick explains they just passed a sign that said, "You are now in leaving Bikini Bottom." SpongeBob gasps loudly and looks out the window in alarm. Patrick asks, "What is wrong?" The bus drives past another green sign that says Bikini Bottom City Limits. SpongeBob tells Patrick that he thinks they are on the wrong bus, but before he can finish his sentence, something extremely strange happens. The bus drives down a 90-degree angle steep road. This is not an exaggeration or a visual joke. The road is literally completely vertical, going straight down at a perfect right angle. SpongeBob and Patrick yell as they fall backward and hit the back of the bus. They end up looking flattened against the back wall. SpongeBob slowly walks up to the front of the bus, holding onto the seats to help himself move forward against the intense pressure. His face gets distorted as he moves closer to the front due to the strong force. His pants rip off and fly at Patrick, who ducks in time. Then SpongeBob's underwear flies off and hits Patrick in the face. The bus comes to an immediate stop at the end of the steep vertical road next to a strange-looking bus stop. SpongeBob and Patrick both fly forward and hit the windshield. Then the balloon smacks the bus driver onto the windshield and all of them peel off together. The bus driver kicks SpongeBob and Patrick out of the bus. SpongeBob tells the bus driver that they need to get back to Bikini Bottom. The bus driver hands SpongeBob the balloon and says, "Oh well," before driving away. This is the first major mystery about Rock Bottom. The episode shows that to get to Rock Bottom from Bikini Bottom, you must travel down a road that goes straight down at a 90-degree angle. This defies all normal physics and logic. Even in the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, where cartoon physics regularly allow impossible things to happen, this is presented as unusual and shocking. SpongeBob and Patrick are terrified during the descent and get thrown around violently inside the bus. The bus itself is able to drive straight down a vertical surface as if gravity works differently, but the episode never explains how this is possible or why a road would be built this way. It is simply presented as a fact that rock bottom is located at the bottom of a vertical cliff and can only be reached by driving straight down. Patrick asks what this place is. SpongeBob reads a sign that says rock bottom. The camera scrolls over to show a bus station. SpongeBob says it sure is weird around here and that it is kind of different. He says even the soil looks different and picks up some green dirt. The soil suddenly speaks and asks SpongeBob to please mind putting it down. The soil makes a raspberry sound between words. SpongeBob gasps and rapidly shakes the talking soil off his hand. This is the second major mystery. The soil in rock bottom is alive and can talk. This never happens in Bikini Bottom. The ground in Bikini Bottom is shown many times throughout the series, and it never speaks or shows any signs of being alive. But in rock bottom, even the dirt is a living creature that can communicate. The episode does not explain why this is the case, or what this means about rock bottom as a location. Patrick tells SpongeBob that he does not like rock bottom. He says it is dark and scary and he does not want to be here. He says he wants to go home. Patrick points to 2 bathroom doors and says he cannot even tell the bathrooms apart. One door has a question mark on it, and the other door has an upside-down question mark on it. SpongeBob says that is an easy problem to solve, and they just need to wait for somebody to come out, and then they will know which is which. A creature called Incidental 200 comes out of the upside-down question mark door. Patrick gasps. SpongeBob says maybe they should wait for one more person. Another creature called Incidental 214 comes out of the regular question mark door, while 3 other creatures called Incidentals 222. 204, and 201 come out of the upside-down question mark door. Patrick's eyes become bloodshot and he starts to sweat. He says he still cannot read the sign and is shaking in fear. He repeats that he wants to go home. This bathroom door scene reveals another mystery about rock bottom. The inhabitants of rock bottom use a completely different system of symbols and logic that makes no sense to visitors from Bikini Bottom. The question mark and upside-down question mark do not correspond to any recognizable bathroom labeling system. Multiple different creatures come out of both doors in a pattern that provides no useful information about which bathroom is which. The episode suggests that the bathroom signs are deliberately confusing or operate under rules that SpongeBob and Patrick cannot understand. The show never explains what the question marks mean or how the residents of Rock Bottom know which bathroom to use. SpongeBob tells Patrick to wait for the bus and call him when it comes because he is going to get a bus schedule. He walks off and says this place sure is creepy. Then he sees the bus driving by with Patrick's head sticking out the window. Patrick yells that the bus is here. SpongeBob runs after the bus but is too late. Patrick yells SpongeBob's name in worry as the bus drives away. The bus drives up the 90-degree angle road. SpongeBob tries to run up the vertical road but falls down. He tries a couple more times but cannot do it. SpongeBob says he guesses Grandpa SquarePants was right about not running for a bus. He puts on a disguise to look like his grandfather and says especially one that is going up at a 90-degree angle. He takes off the disguise and says he better go wait for the next bus. This scene reveals another critical mystery about Rock Bottom. The buses that service Rock Bottom can drive up and down vertical 90-degree angle roads, but SpongeBob cannot run up them. This means the transportation system in Rock Bottom operates under completely different physical laws. The buses have some capability that allows them to stick to vertical surfaces and drive straight up and down. SpongeBob, despite being able to do many impossible things throughout the series, cannot overcome gravity in this specific location. The episode never explains how the buses work or why SpongeBob is unable to follow them up the vertical road. The episode transitions to SpongeBob standing by the bus stop sign holding his glove balloon. He says, "Come on, bus," because he has to get home and feed Gary. He notices his shoe is untied and lets go of the balloon to tie it. While SpongeBob is tying his shoe and reciting the steps out loud, a bus drives up and then drives away without him noticing. When he finishes tying his shoe, he realizes he missed the bus and groans. The episode transitions to later when wind is blowing SpongeBob's glove hat to the side. He puts it back, but the wind blows his balloon away. SpongeBob chases after the balloon, trying to catch it. While he is chasing the balloon, a bus drives up and drives away. SpongeBob yells to wait and stop the bus. He says not again and throws his hat down. SpongeBob notices a creature named Bert and asks if he can help. Bert gives a raspberry sound. SpongeBob tries to respond, but Bert runs after the balloon. SpongeBob yells no, not the balloon, and tries to explain he needs to know when the next bus comes. While SpongeBob is talking, another bus drives up and drives away. SpongeBob runs after it, but then decides to walk back to the bus stop sign. He says there goes another one and he has to be more diligent. He announces he is not leaving this spot no matter what. His stomach growls. He realizes he is getting hungry and remembers he has a glove candy dispenser. He squeezes out 6 tiny glove candies onto his tongue and then spits them out, saying they taste like glove flavor. Then he notices a candy vending machine across the road. He sees it has kelp nougat crunch. His stomach growls again. He checks each side of the road to see if a bus is coming and repeats that he is not leaving this spot no matter what. His stomach growls a 3rd time and he says he will only be gone a second. SpongeBob runs over to the candy machine, but while he is getting out a quarter, a bus drives up and he runs back across to the bus stop. The bus drives off before he can reach it. His stomach growls again. He takes a few steps across the road and turns around to check for the bus. He takes a few more steps and checks again. He gets to the candy machine and takes out his quarter. Before inserting it, he checks for a bus. There is no bus, so he puts in the quarter, but a bus immediately appears and drives off. SpongeBob checks to his left down the road and decides to sprint across and get some candy. He pushes some buttons on the machine and checks for the bus. The candy is slowly coming down. SpongeBob says, "Come on, come on." The candy drops to the bottom and SpongeBob reaches for it, but a bus drives up and then drives off. SpongeBob gets angry. He reaches for the candy, but a bus comes up. Every single time he reaches for the candy, the bus drives forward. When he pulls his arm away, the bus drives backwards. He decides to leave the candy and run after the bus, but the bus drives off before he can get there. Another creature called Incidental 222 comes up and takes SpongeBob's candy. SpongeBob yells that it was his candy. While SpongeBob is over at the candy machine, 3 more buses drive up and drive off. He runs back to the bus stop and shakes the bus sign angrily while yelling barnacles. He says, "That is it, and there will be no more Mr. Nice Guy." This extended sequence reveals something deeply strange about how Rock Bottom functions. The buses in Rock Bottom seem to operate on a schedule or pattern that is specifically designed to be impossible for SpongeBob to catch. Every single time SpongeBob is distracted or away from the bus stop for even a moment, a bus arrives and leaves immediately. When SpongeBob is watching and waiting, no buses come. When he reaches for the candy, the bus moves forward, but when he pulls his arm away, the bus moves backward, as if it is deliberately toying with him. This suggests that either the buses operate on an extremely frequent but unpredictable schedule, or there is something about Rock Bottom that makes it intentionally difficult for outsiders to leave. The episode never explains why the buses behave this way or how the residents of Rock Bottom are able to successfully catch these buses when SpongeBob cannot. The episode transitions to show SpongeBob at the candy machine staring at it while a bus drives up. Another SpongeBob tiptoes up to the bus, but the SpongeBob at the candy machine falls over, revealing it to be made of cardboard. The bus drives off. SpongeBob yells tartar sauce. The episode transitions to SpongeBob disguised as a bus stop bench. A bus drives up but drives off after it notices the SpongeBob bench. SpongeBob morphs back to his original shape and yells fish paste. These scenes show SpongeBob attempting increasingly desperate strategies to trick the buses into stopping, but every attempt fails. The episode transitions to SpongeBob walking into the bus station. He announces he is getting to the bottom of this right now. He demands a bus to Bikini Bottom and declares he is first in line and no one is going to tell him otherwise. Then he sees a creature called Incidental 220 standing behind him already in line. SpongeBob says, "Okay, he is second in line." Then he sees another creature called Incidental 206 already in line. SpongeBob says, "Okay, third is good." Then he sees Incidental 205 already in line. SpongeBob says fourth is not bad. The episode transitions to show SpongeBob at the very end of a long line behind a creature called Incidental 221. SpongeBob says, "Okay, 329. He announces he is 329th in line and nobody should forget it. Incidental 221 inflates herself like a balloon and spits out a giant egg on SpongeBob's head with the number 329 written on it. She makes a raspberry sound. A window attendant calls for the next person in line. The attendant makes a raspberry sound. SpongeBob says, "Well, at least the line is moving." Everyone steps forward one spot. The egg with the number 329 on it hatches and 3 baby fish jump in front of SpongeBob. This means SpongeBob remains 329th in line even though the line moved forward. SpongeBob gets extremely furious and lets out an angry growl. He repeatedly yells tartar sauce and goes ballistic before calming down. Everyone who is staring at him turns around. Time passes quickly and the window attendant keeps calling next and making raspberry sounds. SpongeBob falls asleep standing in line. The attendant calls next twice before SpongeBob wakes up. The attendant says next again and makes a raspberry sound. SpongeBob realizes he is finally next and runs up to the window. He asks, "When is the next bus to Bikini Bottom?" The window attendant asks what, and makes a raspberry sound. SpongeBob repeats that he wants the bus schedule and to know when the next bus comes. The window attendant, who is revealed to be Incidental 222, says he cannot understand SpongeBob's accent. He makes raspberry sounds between his words. SpongeBob tries again and says the next bus, making a raspberry sound. He says to bikini, making a raspberry sound. He says bottom and makes a long raspberry sound. The attendant says oh and asks why SpongeBob did not say so. He makes raspberry sounds between his words. He says the next bus leaves in 5 seconds. The bus immediately leaves. The attendant says oh, tough luck kid, that is the last bus until morning. He makes raspberry sounds between his words. SpongeBob says oh no you do not, and makes raspberry sounds between his words. The attendant says goodnight and puts up a closed sign. This is perhaps the most important scene for understanding the central mystery of Rock Bottom. The window attendant directly states that he cannot understand SpongeBob's accent. The difference between SpongeBob's way of speaking and the Rock Bottom residents' way of speaking is that the Rock Bottom residents make raspberry sounds between their words. SpongeBob does not naturally make these sounds. When SpongeBob starts making raspberry sounds between his words, the attendant immediately understands him and says, "Why did not you say so?" This reveals that the raspberry sounds are not just a quirk or character trait, they are actually a required part of the language spoken in Rock Bottom. Without making raspberry sounds, SpongeBob's words are incomprehensible to Rock Bottom residents. With raspberry sounds, he can be understood perfectly. This means Rock Bottom has its own distinct language or dialect that is completely different from how everyone speaks in Bikini Bottom. The episode never explains why Rock Bottom residents speak this way, how this language developed, or why it is so fundamentally different from the language spoken just a short distance away in Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob tells the attendant to hold on because he is not through. He makes raspberry sounds. He asks if the attendant can hear him and makes raspberry sounds. He demands the attendant come back and give him a bus to Bikini Bottom right now. He says until then, he is not leaving this spot. He makes 3 raspberry sounds. The lights turn off and SpongeBob laughs nervously. He says okay, like he said, he will be right here when the attendant gets back. He says he will be at this spot, in the dark, by himself, with no one around. He says except he has his glove light. He turns on the light and says that is better. The glove light immediately buzzes with a spark and stops working. There is a short pause. SpongeBob says this is not average everyday darkness. He says this is advanced darkness. He says if he closes his eyes, it does not seem so dark. A raspberry sound is heard in the distance. SpongeBob opens his eyes and asks who is there. He walks down the road and says he guesses that spot will be there tomorrow and he better just keep walking. He hears another raspberry sound and says he should be running. He says better start running and repeats the word running. He hears another raspberry sound and yells sprinting. He says he just has to keep sprinting. He runs into the 90-degree angle road and crashes. He sits down with scallops flying around his head like birds circling a concussed person in cartoons. He says sitting, bleeding. He hears a noise and asks who is there. He hears another raspberry sound and yells, that is enough. He hears another raspberry sound and says, do not come closer. He hears another raspberry sound and says he is warning whoever it is. He hears another raspberry sound and yells that he is a sponge. A red light shines around SpongeBob. It is Bert from earlier in the episode. SpongeBob says, oh, it is only you. Bert ties the white balloon from earlier to SpongeBob's wrist. SpongeBob says, well, that solves his balloon problem, but he has a bigger problem. Bert begins blowing the balloon bigger. SpongeBob says he is kind of stuck here and needs to catch a bus to get home. He asks if Bert understands a word he is saying. SpongeBob says balloon, making a raspberry sound. He says has, making a raspberry sound. He says enough, making a raspberry sound. He says air, making a raspberry sound. He says thanks and makes a raspberry sound. He makes a few more raspberry sounds as he starts floating upward. SpongeBob says he gets it. This is balloon travel. He thanks Bert while making raspberry sounds. Bert says you are welcome. This is the only time in the entire episode that Bert speaks actual words instead of just making raspberry sounds. SpongeBob continues to float upward while leaving Rock Bottom. The episode transitions to show Bikini Bottom as SpongeBob floats past a sign that says entering Rock Bottom on his way up. He is still floating upward with the balloon tied to his wrist. He floats past downtown Bikini Bottom on the way to his home. SpongeBob says, ah, home at last. The balloon immediately pops. The final scene shows Patrick riding another bus going down to Rock Bottom. Patrick yells, do not worry, SpongeBob, he is coming back for him. The bus passes by Patrick's house, Squidward's house, and SpongeBob's house as the episode ends. The ending of the episode creates yet another mystery. Patrick is shown riding a bus back to Rock Bottom, presumably to rescue SpongeBob. But SpongeBob already escaped and is home. This means Patrick is about to arrive in Rock Bottom and find that SpongeBob is not there. The episode ends before showing what happens to Patrick. Since Rock Bottom is never mentioned or shown again in any future episode of the series, the audience never finds out what happened to Patrick. Did Patrick get stuck in rock bottom like SpongeBob did? Did Patrick successfully catch a bus back home? Did Patrick have the same struggles that SpongeBob had? These questions are never answered. There are numerous mysteries about rock bottom that the show never addresses or explains. The first and most obvious mystery is the physics of the location. Rock bottom is located at the bottom of a completely vertical 90-degree angle road. Buses can drive straight down this road and straight back up it without any apparent difficulty. SpongeBob cannot run up this road, despite being able to do many physically impossible things throughout the series. The episode never explains how the buses are able to defy gravity in this way. It never explains why a vertical road exists or how it was constructed. It never explains why SpongeBob specifically cannot climb this road when the buses can travel on it freely. The second major mystery is the language spoken in rock bottom. Every single resident of rock bottom makes raspberry sounds between their words when they speak. This is not optional or decorative. The window attendant directly states that he cannot understand SpongeBob's accent when SpongeBob speaks normally. When SpongeBob adds raspberry sounds between his words, he is immediately understood. This means the raspberry sounds are a fundamental part of the rock bottom language. The episode never explains why this language developed, how it works, or why it is completely different from the language spoken in Bikini Bottom, despite the two locations being relatively close to each other geographically. The third mystery is the nature of rock bottom itself as a location. The episode establishes that rock bottom is extremely dark compared to Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob describes it as advanced darkness. The soil in rock bottom is alive and can speak. The residents of rock bottom are visually different from the residents of Bikini Bottom. They have strange body shapes, different colors, and unusual features. Some of them can do things that seem impossible, like Incidental 221 being able to inflate herself like a balloon and lay an egg with a number on it. The bathroom signs use symbols that make no logical sense. The whole location operates under rules that are fundamentally different from Bikini Bottom. The fourth mystery is the transportation system. The buses in rock bottom seem to run on a schedule that is completely impossible for SpongeBob to predict or follow. Buses arrive and leave within seconds. They seem to appear whenever SpongeBob is not looking and disappear whenever he tries to catch them. The candy machine incident suggests the buses may be deliberately avoiding SpongeBob or operating on a schedule that is incompatible with how he thinks. The episode never explains how the residents of rock bottom successfully catch these buses or why SpongeBob has so much difficulty. The fifth mystery is the balloon travel system. At the end of the episode, Bert helps SpongeBob escape by inflating a balloon that is tied to SpongeBob's wrist. This balloon is strong enough to lift SpongeBob all the way from the bottom of the vertical road back up to Bikini Bottom. The balloon can float upward against gravity and carry a passenger. When Bert says "you are welcome," it suggests that balloon travel is a known method of transportation in rock bottom that Bert was intentionally helping SpongeBob use. But the episode never explains how this works, why balloons in rock bottom have this capability, or whether this is a common way for residents to travel. The sixth and perhaps most significant mystery is why rock bottom is never mentioned again in the entire series. SpongeBob SquarePants continued for many years after this episode aired in 2000. The show has revisited many locations multiple times throughout its run. Locations like Glove World, Goo Lagoon, Jellyfish Fields, the Chum Bucket, and many others appear in numerous episodes. But rock bottom appears only in this one episode from Season 1 and is never referenced again. No character ever mentions their experience in rock bottom. SpongeBob never talks about the strange place he visited where everyone spoke with raspberry sounds. Patrick's fate after riding the bus back to rock bottom is never revealed. The location simply exists for one episode and then is completely forgotten by the show. This is especially strange because rock bottom is one of the most memorable and distinctive locations in the entire series. The episode is frequently cited by fans as one of the creepiest and most unsettling episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. The dark atmosphere, the strange residents, the incomprehensible language, and SpongeBob's increasing desperation as he fails to catch bus after bus create a genuinely uncomfortable viewing experience. The episode has become iconic specifically because of how different and weird rock bottom is compared to the rest of the show. Despite this, the show never returns to rock bottom or explains anything about it. Some fans have created theories to explain rock bottom. One common theory is that rock bottom represents a deeper, more remote part of the ocean where the environment and evolution have created fundamentally different life forms. This would explain why the residents look different, speak differently, and why the location is so dark. The 90-degree road could represent a literal cliff or drop-off into a deeper ocean zone. However, this theory does not explain the impossible physics of buses driving on vertical roads or why the soil is alive and can speak. Another theory is that rock bottom is meant to represent a nightmare or anxiety dream. The episode focuses heavily on SpongeBob's frustration and fear as he repeatedly fails to catch the bus home, the escalating absurdity of the situations, the hostile or indifferent behavior of the residents, and the oppressive darkness all resemble the logic of a nightmare where the dreamer is trying to accomplish a simple task but keeps failing for increasingly ridiculous reasons. The episode ends with SpongeBob escaping through balloon travel, which could represent waking up from the dream. However, this theory does not work because Patrick is shown going to rock bottom at the end, which confirms that it is a real place that exists independently of SpongeBob's experience. A third theory is that rock bottom is simply an example of the show's surreal humor taken to an extreme. SpongeBob SquarePants frequently features absurd situations, impossible physics, and strange characters. Rock bottom could be an intentionally exaggerated version of this, creating a location that is weird even by the standards of a show that is already very weird. The raspberry language, the vertical roads, and the talking soil are just pushed further than usual to create a memorable and unsettling episode. This theory explains why rock bottom is never explained or revisited. It exists purely as a one-time experiment in how strange and uncomfortable the show could make a location feel. The truth is that rock bottom remains completely unexplained. The episode presents a location with its own language, physics, inhabitants, and transportation system that are all fundamentally different from Bikini Bottom. The show treats this as strange and frightening from SpongeBob's perspective, but never provides any information about why Rock Bottom is this way. The residents of Rock Bottom seem to consider their way of life completely normal. They are not surprised by the vertical roads, or the raspberry language, or the advanced darkness. From their perspective, SpongeBob is the one who is strange because he cannot speak properly and does not understand how their buses work. Rock Bottom stands as one of the most enigmatic locations in SpongeBob SquarePants. It is a place that exists for 22 minutes of screen time and then vanishes from the show's continuity entirely. No explanation is given for its existence, its strange properties, or why no character ever mentions it again. The episode creates a deeply unsettling atmosphere that has stayed with viewers for over 2 decades, but the mysteries it presents are never solved. Rock Bottom is a city that should not exist according to the normal rules of the SpongeBob universe, but it does exist, and the show has no interest in explaining why. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to SB 129 and the true nature of time in Bikini Bottom. In the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, there exists an episode that deals with time travel, alternate dimensions, and a paradox that the show never attempts to explain or resolve. This episode is called SB 129, and it aired on December 31, 1999. The episode shows Squidward accidentally traveling 2,000 years into the future, then going back to prehistoric times, and finally ending up in a blank void dimension before returning to the present. The episode features a time machine that exists in the Krusty Krab of the future, but the show never explains who built this machine, how it works, why it exists, or how Squidward's actions might have created a time paradox that affects the entire history of Bikini Bottom. These mysteries are never addressed in this episode or any future episode of the series. The episode begins on a Sunday morning in Bikini Bottom. The French narrator explains that it is time for Squidward to practice his clarinet and tells viewers to get their earplugs ready. Squidward kisses his clarinet and says he thinks he will treat Bikini Bottom to some real music. He gets ready to play when SpongeBob's alarm clock goes off next door. The sound is so loud it sends Squidward's clarinet into his throat. Squidward yells and struggles to pull the clarinet out of his throat. SpongeBob appears at his door asking if Squidward wants to go jellyfishing. Every time Squidward tries to respond, his clarinet makes sounds because it is stuck in his throat. SpongeBob interprets this as agreement and says they will be right over. Squidward finally pulls the clarinet out of his throat. SpongeBob and Patrick knock on the door repeatedly, asking if Squidward is ready to go jellyfishing. Squidward keeps saying no and slamming the door. This happens many times in a row, with SpongeBob asking if he is ready now. Eventually, SpongeBob and Patrick disappear from the doorway and approach Squidward from behind. SpongeBob taps his shoulder and asks if he is ready yet. Squidward yells that he is not ready, will never be ready, and asks if they get it. SpongeBob says sure they do. Squidward is confused by this response. He shuts the door and leaves his house, then realizes he is outside. He runs back to his door and knocks. SpongeBob opens it and asks if he is ready. Squidward slaps his forehead and pushes SpongeBob and Patrick out of his house. He asks if SpongeBob should be at work today. SpongeBob says he would love to be at work, but it is Sunday and the Krusty Krab is closed. Squidward gets an idea. He tells them to hold on a second and that he will be right out. He closes the door and then sneaks out the other side of his house. He goes to the Krusty Krab and enters the restaurant. He says hello, but there is silence. He says, alone at last. He tries to play his clarinet, but hears SpongeBob and Patrick outside calling his name. Squidward runs into the kitchen as SpongeBob and Patrick enter the Krusty Krab searching for him. Squidward runs into the freezer. SpongeBob and Patrick continue calling his name while looking for him. Squidward peeks out as they search. SpongeBob says Squidward is not here, and he bets that Eager Beaver is already down at Jellyfish Fields. Squidward says, "Aha, they are finally gone." He tries to open the freezer door, but discovers it is locked from the inside. He tries to open it multiple times. He says it is locked and oh no. He says, oh well, someone will realize he is gone and come looking for him. He says he will be out of here in no time. The French narrator announces 2,000 years later. The scene shows Squidward still inside the freezer, completely frozen. The hinges on the freezer door are rusty and they fall off. The door falls with Squidward frozen behind it. A robot that looks like SpongeBob flies past and then comes back to look at Squidward. This robot says holy Krabby Patties, a frozen cephalopod. The robot, who is called Spongetron, grabs a chrome hammer. From the hammer comes a red laser, which melts the ice. The laser hits Squidward's buttocks, and Squidward screams. Squidward says in a trance-like voice that he will be out of here in no time. Spongetron greets him and calls him primitive. Squidward asks if that is SpongeBob. Spongetron says no, and explains in a robot voice that he is Spongetron. He speaks in a normal voice and says, "Welcome to the future." Squidward asks what? Spongetron repeats, "Welcome to the future." Squidward repeats the word future and notices everything is chrome. He asks what is going on and why everything is chrome. Spongetron explains that everything is chrome in the future. Squidward stammers and runs to look outside a window. He says, "Oh my," and notices the chrome environment. The screen shows the chrome environment around them. Squidward says impossible and that Spongetron is lying. A flower pops up from underground. A truck arrives, and someone called Incidental One. 19 gets out, runs up to the flower, sprays it with chrome spray paint, runs back to the truck, and drives away. Squidward looks at the screen and then looks away from the window. He says Spongetron is right. Spongetron says of course he is right and tells Squidward to ask his clones, Spongetron's X, Y, and Z. Squidward flinches as 3 Spongetron clones suddenly appear next to them. Squidward asks if the other letters of the alphabet are involved. Spongetron says sure, all 486 of them. A calendar on the wall says March 6, 4017 AD. This means Squidward entered the freezer on March 6, 2017. Squidward does some sit-ups while talking as if trying to wake up. He keeps saying the word future repeatedly. Spongetron drops a brick on Squidward's head. Squidward thanks him and then tells all of them to listen. He says he does not belong here and this is all a horrible mistake. He says they have to do something. The Spongetron clones pull out jellyfishing nets and say jellyfishing. A 2-headed Patrick appears out of nowhere. This creature is called Patron. Patron asks if somebody said jellyfishing. Spongetron says hi Patron. Squidward tells them to listen to him. He says he is not supposed to be here, and he has to get home to his own time period. He says he has to go. Spongetron asks why Squidward did not just ask. He explains the time machine is down the hall to the left. Squidward runs to the door, laughs, and enters. The sound of a can opener being used is heard. Squidward steps out and is torn into pieces, now appearing like a spring-shaped patch of skin. Spongetron says oops, and explains that one is the can opener. He tells Squidward to try the one on the right. Squidward tries the door on the right and enters a pink and green room. Inside is a machine that looks like a slot with the words past and future written on it. There is a key near the slot. Squidward says he would not have chosen this interior. He notices the time travel handle and asks what this is. He says if SpongeBob exists in the future, he better go to the past. Squidward turns the key and puts the lever on past. A siren goes off as the time machine disappears from where it used to be in the Krusty Krab. Spongetron waves at Squidward. The door and the wall fly through a hyperspace like warp. The time machine appears in a primitive Bikini Bottom. This is the first major mystery of the episode. The time machine exists inside the Krusty Krab in the year 4017. Spongetron tells Squidward exactly where to find it as if it is a normal piece of equipment that everyone knows about. Spongetron does not seem surprised that there is a time machine in the building. He acts like it is perfectly ordinary for the Krusty Krab to contain a device that can travel through time. The episode never explains who built this time machine, when it was built, why it was built, or why it is located inside the Krusty Krab specifically. Spongetron refers to it casually as if time travel is a common and unremarkable technology in the future, but the show provides no information about how this technology was developed or why it exists. Squidward looks out and sees an ammonite swim by. Whale calls can be heard. Squidward says, "Wow, primitive." He says it has sort of an old world charm. A snake-like creature swims very close to Squidward's face. Squidward says whoa and guesses. This is before manners were invented. He says at least there is no sign of Sponge Brat. He says maybe now he can finally be alone with his clarinet. He hears a noise and turns around, but a shadow quickly hides. He hears another noise and checks again, but a different shadow hides. One of the shadow figures swings from tree to tree. Shadow figures keep hiding behind trees and ledges. Squidward keeps walking and then notices a prehistoric sponge on the ground. Squidward asks if it is SpongeBob. The primate sponge screams. Squidward tells him to stay back. Primate sponge touches Squidward's arm and then sniffs his finger from what he touched. The primate sponge tries to give some to Squidward. Squidward says no thanks. Squidward feels someone breathing on him. He turns and notices a prehistoric starfish breathing on him. Prehistoric starfish smiles and reveals nasty, rotten teeth. Squidward says hi there and that he better be going now. Prehistoric sponge grabs Squidward's tentacle. Squidward says yes, that is his arm. Prehistoric sponge puts Squidward's arm on his head. Prehistoric starfish licks his hand. Squidward says that is sweet. Prehistoric starfish gets scared and smashes on the ground with the shivers. Squidward asks if it is time for his flea bath. A jellyfish swims by, and prehistoric starfish ducks for protection. Squidward says, oh look, it is just a little jellyfish. Primate sponge and prehistoric starfish run around screaming. Squidward says he is going away now. Squidward finds a nice shady spot away from them. He plays his clarinet. Each time he tries to play, primate sponge and prehistoric starfish holler in pain while taking turns holding the jellyfish. Squidward asks what they are doing. He says they are supposed to catch these things, not torture themselves with them. Primate sponge and prehistoric starfish look confused. Squidward tells them to give him their loincloths. Primate sponge and prehistoric starfish tear off a piece of their loincloth. Squidward says he cannot believe it and mumbles to himself. He crafts the loincloth into jellyfishing nets. He shows them the nets and says this ought to make things go a little smoother. He gives primate sponge and prehistoric starfish their nets. They put the nets on their lips. Squidward slaps his forehead and grabs the nets back. He tells them to give him those things. He says they are supposed to catch them like this. Squidward catches the jellyfish in one of the loincloth nets. He says it is called jellyfishing. Primate SpongeBob and prehistoric starfish grab the nets and chase the jellyfish. This scene creates the second major mystery of the episode. Squidward travels to prehistoric times and teaches the primitive ancestors of SpongeBob and Patrick how to catch jellyfish using nets. He specifically tells them this activity is called jellyfishing. This is extremely important because in the present day, SpongeBob and Patrick are obsessed with jellyfishing and constantly try to get Squidward to go jellyfishing with them. The episode implies that Squidward may have invented jellyfishing by traveling back in time and teaching it to the prehistoric ancestors. But this creates a time paradox. If Squidward only went back in time because he was trying to escape from SpongeBob and Patrick's constant requests to go jellyfishing, but jellyfishing only exists because Squidward went back in time and invented it, then where did jellyfishing originally come from? This is a classic time loop paradox, and the episode never addresses or resolves it. Squidward says finally and sits on the ground to play his clarinet. Primate sponge and prehistoric starfish hear it, go berserk, and chase Squidward. Squidward runs into the time machine as they try to get in by climbing on top of it. Squidward screams for them to get him out of here. He frantically jams the lever up and down and accidentally snaps it off. He says, oh. The word future spins like a slot machine and stops on 2 lemons and a bar. The time machine announces loser. Primate sponge and prehistoric starfish bang on the time machine, trying to get to Squidward until it disappears into thin air. The time machine shakes from the inside, with Squidward scared. The camera zooms in with a pain effect. The camera focuses on Squidward's face, and a color change effect goes off as Squidward mouths the line, "What is going on?" without audible dialogue. The screen flashes white. The time machine goes through all sorts of dimensions. One dimension looks like a computer area. The time machine folds like paper and vanishes with a zap sound. This sequence reveals the third major mystery. When Squidward breaks the time machine's lever, the device malfunctions in an extremely strange way. Instead of simply stopping or breaking down, the time machine starts traveling through multiple dimensions that appear to have nothing to do with time. One dimension looks like the inside of a computer. The time machine itself physically folds like paper. These visual effects suggest the time machine is not just moving through time, but is somehow moving through completely different realities or dimensions of existence. The episode never explains what these dimensions are, why they exist, or how the time machine is able to access them when it malfunctions. Squidward appears in a blank white space. He walks around and hears a strange voice. He notices some colored tiles and lifts one up. The tile floats and vanishes. Squidward says he is not here. He says no more SpongeBob. He says no more. He says he may finally have found a place where he can be all alone. As he says the word alone, Squidward becomes tiny. The word alone appears many times with a different voice saying it each time. The voices keep chanting alone repeatedly as the screen continuously gets smaller and smaller. Squidward suddenly appears closer to the camera and speaks to it. He says he has to get out of here. Squidward tries to run, but he runs off and on the scene. He stops and tries to catch his breath. A strange voice is heard. He holds his head, sweats a little, and runs again off and on the scene. He stops running after 3 tries to get out. Another strange voice is heard when he stops. Squidward asks where the time machine is. He asks where anything is. He repeats the word where multiple times. He jumps up and down angrily and busts a hole through the ground into the time machine. This blank white space is the 4th major mystery. Squidward ends up in what appears to be a dimension of pure nothingness. There is nothing visible except white space and some colored tiles. The laws of physics do not work normally in this space. Squidward can run, but he does not move to a new location. He just runs off one side of the screen and appears on the other side. The voices that repeat the word alone do not seem to belong to any visible creatures. The space itself seems to be responding to what Squidward says. When he says he wants to be alone, the word alone echoes and multiplies. The episode never explains what this place is, whether it is another dimension or some kind of void between dimensions, or why the broken time machine brought Squidward here specifically. The time machine's handle is still broken off. Squidward bangs on the broken controls and sobs. He says he wants to go home repeatedly. He says he misses Bikini Bottom. He says he misses his Easter Island head. He says he even misses SpongeBob. Right when Squidward says SpongeBob, the time machine disappears and reappears in present-time Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob and Patrick are still waiting for Squidward in front of his house. Squidward says their names. SpongeBob and Patrick say hi, Squidward. Squidward says, "Oh, he is back." He says he cannot believe this. He says he was in space and he went to the future, and then he went to the past, and then he was nowhere, but now he is back. He tells them they do not know how happy he is to see them. This is perhaps the most mysterious moment in the entire episode. The time machine is completely broken. The lever has been snapped off, and the controls do not work. Squidward is trapped in a void dimension with no way to operate the machine. But when Squidward says out loud that he misses SpongeBob, the time machine immediately activates and returns him to the exact moment in present time when he left. The episode strongly implies that simply saying SpongeBob's name or expressing that he misses SpongeBob caused the time machine to activate and bring him home. But this makes no logical sense. How can a machine respond to emotional statements? How can a broken machine suddenly work perfectly when it hears a specific name? The episode provides no explanation for this. It suggests the time machine operates on rules that have nothing to do with normal technology or physics. SpongeBob asks if this means Squidward wants to go jellyfishing. Squidward yells no and asks who is the barnacle head who invented that game anyway. SpongeBob and Patrick both say you are Squidward. Squidward turns his head to face the camera. SpongeBob and Patrick laugh. The scene cuts to show Bikini Atoll on the surface. Squidward says he is going back. The episode ends. This final line creates the 5th major mystery and confirms the time paradox. SpongeBob and Patrick directly tell Squidward that he is the one who invented jellyfishing. This is stated as a known fact in the present day, but the episode just showed Squidward inventing jellyfishing in the prehistoric past during his time travel adventure. This means jellyfishing only exists because Squidward went back in time, but Squidward only went back in time to escape from jellyfishing, which exists because he went back in time. This is a closed time loop with no clear origin point. The episode presents this paradox at the very end, and then immediately ends without addressing it. Squidward says he is going back, but it is unclear if he means going back in time or just going back inside his house. The show never revisits this paradox in any future episode. There are multiple mysteries about this episode that are never explained. The first mystery is the existence and nature of the time machine itself. The time machine is located inside the Krusty Krab of the year 4017. Spongetron knows exactly where it is and directs Squidward to it without any surprise or concern. This suggests time machines are common technology in the future. But the episode never shows any other time machines or references to time travel being common. The time machine appears to be a permanent fixture of the future Krusty Krab, but there is no explanation for why a fast food restaurant would have a time machine or who built it. The design and function of the time machine is also mysterious. The machine is described as being down the hall from where Spongetron finds Squidward. Squidward first tries a door on the left and enters a can opener, which tears him into pieces. Then he tries the door on the right and finds the actual time machine. This suggests the future Krusty Krab has multiple strange machines in rooms down the hallway. The time machine room is pink and green and contains a simple slot machine style interface with a key and a lever. The controls are extremely simple. The user turns a key, moves the lever to either past or future, and the machine activates. But there is no way to select a specific time period. The machine apparently decides where and when to take the user. When Squidward selects past, the machine takes him to prehistoric times, but it is not clear if this is the furthest back the machine can go or if it randomly selected that time period. The second mystery is what happens when the time machine breaks. Squidward accidentally snaps off the lever while frantically trying to escape from primate sponge and prehistoric starfish. When the lever breaks, the word future starts spinning like a slot machine. It lands on 2 lemons in a bar. The time machine announces loser. This suggests the time machine has some kind of gambling or random element built into it when it malfunctions. The machine then takes Squidward through multiple strange dimensions before depositing him in the blank void space. None of these dimensions appear to be actual time periods from Bikini Bottom's history or future. They appear to be completely separate realities or dimensional spaces. The episode never explains what these dimensions are, why they exist, or why a time machine would access them when broken. The third mystery is the nature of the void dimension. This blank white space appears to be a dimension of pure nothingness. There are no objects, no locations, and no other beings visible except for Squidward. The space does not follow normal physics. Squidward cannot move to a new location by running. He runs off one side of the visible area and appears on the other side, as if the space loops back on itself. The voices that chant alone do not have any visible source. They simply exist in the space. The colored tiles that Squidward finds can float and disappear when touched. The space seems to respond to what Squidward says by repeating and multiplying the word alone. This suggests the void may have some kind of consciousness or reactive property, but the episode never clarifies this. The fourth mystery is how Squidward escapes the void. The time machine is broken and Squidward cannot operate it. He is trapped in the void with no apparent way out. But when Squidward expresses emotional statements about missing home and specifically says he misses SpongeBob, the time machine immediately activates and returns him to the present. This is extremely mysterious because it suggests the time machine can somehow hear and understand speech and can respond to emotional content rather than just mechanical controls. The machine brings Squidward back to the exact moment he left, which means no time passed in the present, even though Squidward spent significant time in the future, the past, and the void. This implies the time machine can control not just where you go, but also when you return to in your original timeline. The fifth mystery is the jellyfishing time paradox. The episode shows Squidward teaching primate sponge and prehistoric starfish how to catch jellyfish using nets. He tells them this activity is called jellyfishing. Then, at the end of the episode, SpongeBob and Patrick tell Squidward that he invented jellyfishing. This creates an impossible time loop. Squidward invents jellyfishing in the past. This means SpongeBob and Patrick learn about jellyfishing from ancient history or tradition passed down from their primitive ancestors. SpongeBob and Patrick's obsession with jellyfishing causes them to constantly bother Squidward. Squidward hides in the Krusty Krab freezer to escape from them. This leads to him being frozen for 2,000 years and traveling back in time, which leads to him inventing jellyfishing. The loop has no beginning. Jellyfishing exists because Squidward invented it in the past, but he only invented it because it already existed in the present. The sixth mystery is why this episode is never referenced again. SB 129 features some of the most significant events in the entire series. Squidward travels through time, visits the distant future, meets robot versions of SpongeBob and Patrick, travels to prehistoric times, invents jellyfishing, breaks a time machine, visits a void dimension, and creates a time paradox. But none of these events are ever mentioned in any future episode. Squidward never talks about his time travel experience. No future episode references the existence of time machines. The show never explores the implications of the jellyfishing paradox. The Chrome future with Spongetron and Pattron is never seen or mentioned again. The void dimension is never explained or revisited. The episode exists as a standalone story that has no impact on the rest of the series' continuity. Some fans have created theories to explain these mysteries. One theory is that the entire episode is a dream or hallucination. When Squidward is locked in the freezer, he may have passed out from cold or lack of oxygen and dreamed the entire time travel adventure. The French narrator saying 2,000 years later could be Squidward's confused perception of time while unconscious. The increasingly surreal nature of events, especially the void dimension that responds to his thoughts, resembles dream logic. However, this theory does not explain the final scene where SpongeBob and Patrick tell Squidward he invented jellyfishing. If it was all a dream, how would they know what Squidward dreamed about? Another theory is that the time travel was real but created an alternate timeline. When Squidward traveled back and invented jellyfishing, he may have created a new branch of reality separate from the original timeline. The Squidward who returns at the end may be from a different timeline than the one who left. This would explain why the episode is never referenced again, because the original timeline where these events did not happen continues in future episodes. However, this theory requires assuming the existence of alternate timelines, which the episode never mentions or suggests. A third theory is that time in Bikini Bottom operates on closed-loop rules, where the past cannot be changed because anything you do in the past already happened. In this interpretation, Squidward was always destined to travel back in time and invent jellyfishing. His time travel did not change history, it fulfilled history. The jellyfishing that exists in the present was always invented by a time-traveling Squidward, creating a stable time loop with no beginning. This theory fits the evidence better than the others, but it still does not explain the void dimension or how the broken time machine worked. The truth is that SB-129 presents multiple mysteries about time travel and alternate dimensions that have no clear answers. The episode shows that time travel is possible in Bikini Bottom and that a time machine exists in the future Krusty Krab. But it never explains who built this machine, how it works, why it exists, or why time travel is never mentioned again in the series. The episode shows Squidward creating a time paradox by inventing jellyfishing in the past, but it never explains how this paradox is resolved or whether it creates alternate timelines. The episode shows Squidward visiting a void dimension where normal physics do not apply and the space itself seems conscious, but it never explains what this dimension is or why the time machine can access it. The episode shows the time machine responding to emotional statements and activating when broken after hearing someone say they miss SpongeBob. But it never explains how a machine can do this, or why saying SpongeBob's name has this effect. SB-129 is an episode about time travel that raises more questions than it answers. It presents a complex time paradox, shows multiple mysterious dimensions, features technology that should not exist, and has events that are never referenced again despite their significance. The mysteries presented in this episode remain completely unsolved more than 2 decades after it originally aired. The show has no interest in explaining the rules of time travel in its universe or resolving the paradoxes it creates. SB-129 exists as a strange anomaly in the series, an episode that suggests Bikini Bottom has access to time travel and alternate dimensions, but never explores these concepts again. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next, we have National No SpongeBob Day and the strange emptying of Bikini Bottom. In the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, there exists an episode that presents one of the most disturbing and unexplained events in the entire series. This episode is called Gone, and it aired on March 5, 2008. The episode shows SpongeBob waking up one morning to discover that every single living creature in Bikini Bottom has completely vanished without any warning or explanation. SpongeBob spends what appears to be weeks completely alone before everyone suddenly returns on a bus claiming they were only gone for 1 day. The episode provides a supposed explanation that it was National No SpongeBob Day, but this explanation creates more questions than it answers. The show never explains how an entire city's population could disappear simultaneously, where they actually went, how they coordinated this massive evacuation, why SpongeBob experienced weeks passing while everyone else experienced only days, or how anyone survived for that length of time. These mysteries are never addressed in this episode or any future episode of the series. The episode begins at SpongeBob's house. SpongeBob is sleeping when his alarm clock wakes him up. He struggles to turn it off, yawns, gets out of bed, puts his pants on, and walks into the kitchen to get food for Gary. He accidentally trips because of the heavy bag of food, and there is a big pile of food on top of Gary's bowl. SpongeBob calls for Gary to come and get it. Gary does not come to get the food. Outside SpongeBob's pineapple, the wind is blowing and Bikini Bottom looks completely empty. SpongeBob calls Gary's name multiple times with increasing concern. He looks in the living room, at the top of the staircase, out of a door at the bottom of the staircase, under his bed, and in the toilet. SpongeBob walks back into the kitchen and says Gary must have gotten an early start. He walks away. This opening scene is the first indication that something is wrong. The visual of Bikini Bottom looking completely empty is shown before SpongeBob realizes anything is unusual. The wind is blowing through an abandoned city. This suggests that everyone disappeared sometime during the night while SpongeBob was sleeping. Gary is missing from inside SpongeBob's house, which means even his pet snail vanished. The episode never explains how Gary left the house or where he went. The scene cuts to outside, where SpongeBob is walking up to Squidward's house with a megaphone. He announces "Rise and shine" Squidward and says he does not want to be late again. There is silence. SpongeBob says okay, see you at the Krusty Krab. He talks to himself and says he guesses Squidward needs his beauty sleep. He comments that not everyone is blessed with his natural good looks. The scene cuts to Patrick's house. SpongeBob knocks on it and tells Patrick it is morning and he does not want to forget to wake up again. There is silence again. SpongeBob says Patrick's name, then says, "Okay, see you after work, sleepyhead." These scenes show that SpongeBob initially assumes everyone is still present but just sleeping or busy. He does not immediately realize that something is wrong. He talks to Squidward and Patrick as if they can hear him even though he receives no responses. SpongeBob's comment about Squidward being late again and Patrick forgetting to wake up suggests these are regular occurrences, so their silence does not immediately alarm him. The scene cuts to SpongeBob walking on the street whistling. Nobody else is there. SpongeBob hops over a boat that is in the middle of the road. He walks into the Krusty Krab and stares out the order window. The sun is setting and SpongeBob looks at his watch. He says, "Slow day." He says goodnight to Squidward and goodnight to Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs' office door opens by itself, revealing that Mr. Krabs is not there. This scene reveals the first major mystery. SpongeBob apparently spends an entire workday at the Krusty Krab waiting for customers and coworkers who never arrive. The sun setting indicates that many hours have passed. SpongeBob says, "Slow day," which suggests he still has not fully realized that everyone is gone. He says goodnight to Squidward and Mr. Krabs even though they are not there. Only when Mr. Krabs' office door opens by itself and shows the empty office does the scene visually confirm that Mr. Krabs never came to work. The episode does not show what SpongeBob did during this entire day at the empty restaurant. The scene cuts back to SpongeBob's house. SpongeBob announces he is home and calls for Gary. He asks if Gary is there and calls him Buddy. He walks into the kitchen and realizes that the big pile of food is still there. He calls Gary's name and gasps. He says Gary has not touched his food. SpongeBob runs over to Squidward's house, screaming and knocks on the door. He yells for Squidward to open up. The door opens by itself. SpongeBob asks Squidward if he has seen Gary and says Gary has gone missing. There is no answer. SpongeBob says Squidward's name and comments there is not a sign of Squidward anywhere. He walks upstairs and asks if Squidward is up there. He notices Squidward's clarinet and picks it up. He puts the clarinet in his mouth a few times. He says it is not even warm. He realizes Squidward is missing too. This is when SpongeBob finally understands that people are actually missing rather than just unavailable. The detail about Squidward's clarinet not being warm is important. This suggests Squidward has been gone for many hours, long enough for his clarinet to reach room temperature. Squidward is shown throughout the series as being obsessed with his clarinet and playing it constantly. The fact that his clarinet is cold means he has not played it recently, which would be unusual for Squidward. SpongeBob runs over to Patrick's house and yells for Patrick to open up. He says Squidward and Gary are missing. He lifts up Patrick's rock, revealing that there is nobody there. SpongeBob says Patrick is gone too. He asks, "What if everybody is gone?" The scene cuts to the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob calls for Mr. Krabs and gasps. He says Mr. Krabs is gone too. The scene cuts to Sandy's house. SpongeBob calls for Sandy. He says she is gone. The scene cuts to SpongeBob walking out of 5 different buildings, saying the word gone each time he exits one. He then runs forward on the street, hyperventilating. He asks, "Where did everybody go?" There is a wide shot of Bikini Bottom where SpongeBob's voice echoes off a cliff. He yells that everybody is gone. He swears that he will keep the memory of Bikini Bottom alive by living out their lives for them. This sequence shows SpongeBob methodically checking multiple locations and confirming that everyone has vanished. He checks 5 additional buildings that are not identified. The wide shot of Bikini Bottom emphasizes how completely empty the entire city is. SpongeBob's voice echoing off a cliff suggests there is absolutely no one else present to absorb the sound. His declaration that he will keep the memory of Bikini Bottom alive and live out everyone's lives suggests he believes they are permanently gone or possibly dead. The scene cuts to the next day. SpongeBob is blowing a bubble of himself, then plays a record of him laughing. He runs into Squidward's house, takes the form of Squidward, and imitates him. While imitating Squidward, he says, "SpongeBob, will you be quiet? You are disrupting my genius." He plays off key notes on Squidward's clarinet. The scene transitions to the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob imitates himself, asking Mr. Krabs for a raise. He then sits in Mr. Krabs' chair and takes the form of Mr. Krabs. He imitates Mr. Krabs saying no and telling him to get to work. He responds as himself saying, "Yes, sir, Mr. Krabs, sir." The scene transitions to SpongeBob taking the form of Old Man Jenkins. He imitates Old Man Jenkins asking for a Krabby Patty Deluxe. He responds as Squidward saying, "Right away, sir." He imitates Squidward saying he means whatever. He sticks his head in the kitchen and imitates Squidward, telling SpongeBob they have an order. He giggles and moves a box that looks like him, saying, "Coming up, Squidward." This extended sequence shows SpongeBob coping with isolation by role-playing as different citizens of Bikini Bottom. He physically transforms his body to look like each person and imitates their voices and personalities. He creates elaborate scenarios where he plays multiple characters having conversations with each other. This suggests significant time has passed and SpongeBob is starting to lose his grip on reality. The fact that he creates a cardboard box version of himself to represent SpongeBob in the kitchen shows he is dissociating and treating himself as a separate character. The scene transitions to SpongeBob at Patrick's house where he is sleeping and snoring in Patrick's form. The scene transitions to Sandy's house. SpongeBob asks Sandy if he may have some more delicious iced tea. He responds as Sandy saying, "Why, sure," then says, "Whoops, just a second." He grows a tail and repeats, "Why, sure now, SpongeBob." The scene transitions to Mrs. Puff's boating school with SpongeBob as Mrs. Puff. He imitates Mrs. Puff, asking the class who can tell her the first thing you do when riding a boat. He responds as himself, saying, "Floor it." He responds as Mrs. Puff, saying that is right. "Excellent work, SpongeBob." He responds as himself, thanking Mrs. Puff. He sadly tries to say her name and starts to cry. He says this is pointless and that he is no Mrs. Puff. He says he cannot replace everyone and will never be happy again. He notices a stack of blank driver's licenses on the desk and says, "Ooh, my driver's license." This scene reveals that SpongeBob has been continuing his role-playing routine across multiple days. He has acted out being Patrick sleeping, having tea with Sandy, and attending Mrs. Puff's boating school. His emotional breakdown shows the psychological toll of prolonged isolation. His realization that he cannot replace everyone and will never be happy again is a moment of clarity. However, he is immediately distracted by seeing blank driver's licenses. Throughout the series, SpongeBob has failed his driving test repeatedly and desperately wants a license. With Mrs. Puff gone, there is no one to stop him from simply taking one. The scene cuts to SpongeBob taking a picture of himself to put in the license. He says, "That is the baby." He walks up to a boat and greets it. The boat drives away. SpongeBob pulls it back and says it is okay because he is licensed. He makes sounds and gets in the boat and starts it up. He says, "Oh yeah, listen to that purr." SpongeBob starts driving the boat around Bikini Bottom, causing destruction. He makes sounds while driving. SpongeBob falls asleep while driving and crashes into Patrick's house, causing it to skid up. The house misses Squidward's house and crashes into the top floor of SpongeBob's own house. SpongeBob is shown in bed saying, "Goodnight, Bodie." This is a critical scene because it shows SpongeBob has now been alone long enough to teach himself to drive, obtain a vehicle he names Bodie, and become comfortable enough to fall asleep while driving. The destruction he causes while driving suggests he has been practicing for a considerable time. The fact that he crashes into his own house and ends up in bed with the boat indicates this has become his new normal. This scene strongly suggests that significant time has passed, far more than a single day. The scene cuts to SpongeBob having nightmares and talking in his sleep. He says no, repeatedly, then wakes up screaming. He pants and says, "Oh, Gary, he had a nightmare that all his friends were gone and he was driving something." He screams and notices that Bodie is right next to him in bed. He says, "So it was true." He says he guesses it is just him and Bodie now. The scene cuts to a montage of SpongeBob and Bodie taking a shower together, eating cereal together, crashing out of the pineapple while riding it, jellyfishing together, at Goo Lagoon together, on a seesaw together, and driving into the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob tells Bodie this is where he works and asks if Bodie wants to help cook some Krabby Patties. There is silence. SpongeBob says, "Great." He puts a box of Krabby Patties under Bodie's tire and moves it to get the patties on the grill. He says, "Back when everyone was around, they used to enjoy these." He tells Bodie to try one. He throws a Krabby Patty under Bodie's hood and it splatters everywhere. SpongeBob asks what. Bodie does not like Krabby Patties. He says he guesses they can still make this work. This montage shows that SpongeBob has developed a relationship with an inanimate vehicle and treats it as his companion. The activities shown take place over multiple days and locations. SpongeBob has brought Bodie to numerous places around Bikini Bottom and integrated the boat into every aspect of his daily life. His comment about back when everyone was around suggests he has accepted that his old life is over and he is adapting to permanent isolation. The scene cuts to SpongeBob driving Bodie into the pineapple. SpongeBob says, "Wee you. They learned a lot about each other today." He says he thought he would go crazy without all his friends and acquaintances around, but it looks like Bodie was all he needed to stay sane. Bodie rumbles. SpongeBob asks what? A puppet of his old best friend. Bodie rumbles again. SpongeBob repeats made entirely out of Krabby Patty meat. He laughs and says, "Oh Bodie, you are a card." SpongeBob walks into a closet where he is talking to the puppet Bodie was referring to. He says sorry he is late, Patrick. Bodie was telling him a joke. SpongeBob sticks his hand in the puppet and starts talking for it. The Krabby Patty Patrick puppet says SpongeBob is awfully chummy with that guy for someone who has it out for him. SpongeBob asks who? Bodie. He giggles and says, "Oh no." He asks really. The puppet says it cannot talk now because Bodhi is watching them. SpongeBob says, "Wait, Patrick, do not go." He notices Bodhi is staring at him. SpongeBob says, nothing, Bodhi." He says he is just going to bed. This scene shows that SpongeBob's mental state has deteriorated significantly. He has created a puppet made entirely of Krabby Patty meat that he believes is Patrick. He is now having paranoid delusions where he believes Bodhi is hostile and the Patrick puppet is warning him. He is ventriloquizing for the puppet but seems to genuinely believe it is communicating with him independently. This level of psychological breakdown suggests extended isolation and severe loneliness. The French narrator announces 3 days later. SpongeBob is writing in his diary. He writes, "Dear Diary, not sure if he can trust any vehicle." He writes to run for it as soon as the coast is clear. SpongeBob looks out of the plant he is hiding in and sees there is no one there. He walks into a closet. Bodhi comes in and SpongeBob screams and bursts through the wall of his house. He runs into another boat and screams. He runs into a boat rental and screams. SpongeBob runs inside the Reef Theater. The scene cuts to inside one of the theater rooms, where SpongeBob looks around to make sure there is no Bodhi. He pulls up some popcorn and turns to the screen. A movie about vehicles is being shown and SpongeBob screams. He runs out of the theater and grabs an axe and looks for Bodhi. He sees a bus coming toward him and strikes at it with his axe. The bus stops and everyone in Bikini Bottom steps out. This sequence shows that SpongeBob has become completely paranoid and is now afraid of all vehicles. The French narrator specifically states that 3 days later, which means 3 additional days have passed since the previous scene. This brings the total time SpongeBob has been alone to at least 1 week and likely much longer. SpongeBob is now hiding from vehicles, having paranoid episodes, and has armed himself with an axe. When he sees the bus, he attacks it, which shows how disconnected from reality he has become. The bus stopping and everyone in Bikini Bottom stepping out is the first time other living creatures have appeared in the episode since the opening. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to calm down. SpongeBob says they are all still alive, and asks, where did they go? Mr. Krabs says it was National No SpongeBob Day. SpongeBob repeats National No SpongeBob Day in confusion. Mr. Krabs confirms, yeah, a whole day dedicated to getting away from him. SpongeBob says a day, but they have been gone for weeks. Mr. Krabs says, yeah, well, they kind of milked it a little. Patrick comes out of the bus with balloons and a t-shirt with SpongeBob crossed out on it. SpongeBob asks if Patrick participated too. Patrick confirms, yeah, everyone needs at least 1 day away from him. Patrick mockingly imitates SpongeBob's laugh. SpongeBob says with tears in his eyes that he is glad they had fun and sobs. Mr. Krabs says, "Aw, cheer up, boy. It is a whole day inspired by him." SpongeBob asks, "Really, mister?" Krabs says, of course, and the scene cuts to a flashback. This is where the episode provides its supposed explanation, but this explanation creates massive problems. Mr. Krabs states it was National No SpongeBob Day, which was a whole day dedicated to getting away from SpongeBob. However, SpongeBob directly states that they have been gone for weeks, not a day. Mr. Krabs admits they kind of milked it a little, which suggests they intentionally stayed away longer than 1 day. But this casual admission does not explain the enormous time discrepancy. SpongeBob experienced what felt like weeks of isolation, had multiple psychological breakdowns, formed a relationship with a vehicle, created a meat puppet, and descended into paranoid delusions. This cannot be explained by a few extra days. The episode never clarifies exactly how long everyone was actually gone. The flashback shows everyone in Bikini Bottom except SpongeBob standing around a SpongeBob made of wood. Mr. Krabs narrates that first they built a giant wooden effigy of SpongeBob, then they burned it to the ground. The citizens are shown burning it. Mr. Krabs yells, "Woohoo! Burn, baby!" The scene cuts to everyone dancing on the ashes of the effigy. Mr. Krabs narrates that they danced on the ashes like there was no tomorrow. The flashback ends. SpongeBob says, "Wow, a whole day dedicated to him." He blushes. Patrick says big deal and to wait until No Patrick Day. He tells everyone to come on and let's go. Everyone gets on the bus. SpongeBob knocks Patrick off when he tries to get on. Patrick immediately forgets what happened and asks where everybody went. He says hello repeatedly and looks around. The episode ends. This flashback creates even more questions than it answers. Building a giant wooden effigy would require significant time, materials, and coordination. Burning it and dancing on the ashes would also take considerable time. This cannot be accomplished in a single day, especially when adding in whatever other activities they did during National No SpongeBob Day. The flashback suggests this was an organized event with participation from the entire city, but the episode never explains who organized it, how everyone was notified, or how they all managed to leave simultaneously without SpongeBob noticing. There are numerous mysteries about this episode that are never explained. The first and most obvious mystery is how every single resident of Bikini Bottom disappeared simultaneously. The episode shows that when SpongeBob wakes up, everyone is already gone. This includes Gary, who was inside SpongeBob's house. Gary is a snail who cannot open doors or travel long distances quickly. How did Gary leave SpongeBob's house without waking SpongeBob? Where did Gary go? How did a snail travel to wherever everyone else went? The episode never addresses this. The second mystery is the scope of the disappearance. The episode shows that literally everyone is gone. SpongeBob checks Squidward's house, Patrick's house, Mr. Krabs' office, Sandy's tree dome, and 5 other unidentified buildings. He walks through the streets and sees no one. He spends an entire day at the Krusty Krab and no customers arrive. The city is completely empty. This means every single resident participated in National No SpongeBob Day and left the city. But Bikini Bottom is shown throughout the series as having a large population with thousands of residents. How did thousands of fish coordinate leaving the city at the same time? How did they keep it secret from SpongeBob? The third mystery is where everyone actually went. The episode shows everyone returning on a single bus at the end, but a single bus cannot hold the entire population of Bikini Bottom. The bus is shown as a normal-sized vehicle. When everyone steps out, the shot shows dozens of people exiting, but not thousands. Where did everyone else go? Where was this bus coming from when it arrived? The episode shows the bus driving on the road into Bikini Bottom, which suggests everyone went somewhere outside the city, but the destination is never specified or shown. The fourth mystery is how everyone survived during this time. SpongeBob says they were gone for weeks. Even if Mr. Krabs is downplaying and it was only several days, people still need food, water, and shelter to survive. Where did an entire city's population stay for multiple days? The flashback shows them building and burning an effigy, but this only accounts for one activity on one day. What did they do for the rest of the time? Where did they sleep? What did they eat? Did they bring supplies with them when they left? The episode provides no information about the logistics of keeping thousands of people alive outside their city for an extended period. The fifth mystery is the time discrepancy. SpongeBob clearly experiences a significant amount of time passing. He goes through multiple distinct phases of coping with isolation. He spends a full workday at the Krusty Krab. He spends at least one day role-playing as different characters. He spends multiple days developing a relationship with Bodhi. The French narrator explicitly states 3 days later at one point, and this is only counting the time after he already befriended Bodhi. The episode shows the sun setting and rising multiple times. SpongeBob directly states they were gone for weeks. However, Mr. Krabs claims it was only one day that they milked a little. Even if milking it means several days, this cannot account for the weeks SpongeBob experienced. The episode never explains this discrepancy or suggests that SpongeBob is wrong about how much time passed. The sixth mystery is how National No SpongeBob Day was organized. The flashback shows this was an official event with a name, organized activities, and even merchandise. Patrick is shown holding balloons and wearing a t-shirt with SpongeBob crossed out. This means someone made t-shirts for the event. Someone built a giant wooden effigy. Someone organized the bus transportation. Someone coordinated getting the entire city to leave at the same time. Who did all this? How is it planned without SpongeBob finding out? SpongeBob lives between Squidward and Patrick and works with them regularly. How did they keep such a massive citywide event secret from him? The seventh mystery is what happened to SpongeBob's house and the city during this time. SpongeBob drove Bodhi through the city, causing destruction. He crashed Patrick's house into his own house. The top floor of his house is destroyed. When everyone returns, nobody comments on any of this destruction. Nobody asks why there is a boat in SpongeBob's bedroom or why Patrick's rock is sitting on top of SpongeBob's pineapple. The episode ends without addressing any of the physical damage SpongeBob caused during his isolation. The eighth mystery is the psychological implications. SpongeBob went through severe psychological trauma during his isolation. He had multiple breakdowns. He developed paranoid delusions. He attacked a bus with an axe. When everyone returns, they act like this is funny and no big deal. Nobody expresses concern for SpongeBob's mental state. Nobody apologizes for leaving him alone for so long that he lost his sanity. Mr. Krabs just tells him to cheer up. The episode treats SpongeBob's suffering as a joke, rather than addressing the serious harm that was done. The ninth mystery is why this event exists at all. The episode establishes that National No SpongeBob Day is an annual event, which means it has happened before and will happen again. But SpongeBob had no knowledge of this event, which suggests this was the first time. However, if it is a national day, it must be an established event. The episode never clarifies whether this was the first National No SpongeBob Day, or if SpongeBob somehow missed or forgot about previous ones. The 10th mystery is the ending with Patrick. When SpongeBob knocks Patrick off the bus, Everyone else leaves without him. Patrick immediately forgets what happened and is now alone just like SpongeBob was. The episode ends with Patrick calling out hello and looking around an empty city. This suggests Patrick is about to experience exactly what SpongeBob just went through, but the episode ends before showing what happens. Does Patrick also spend weeks alone and go insane? Do people come back for him? Is this meant to be karmic justice for Patrick participating in National No SpongeBob Day? The episode provides no answers. Some fans have created theories to explain these mysteries. One theory is that National No SpongeBob Day is actually a conspiracy to harm SpongeBob psychologically. The citizens of Bikini Bottom know that SpongeBob cannot handle isolation and deliberately left him alone to cause him mental distress. This would explain why they stayed away for so long despite claiming it was only supposed to be one day. However, this theory requires assuming that everyone in Bikini Bottom is deliberately cruel, which contradicts how the characters are portrayed in other episodes. Another theory is that time passed differently for SpongeBob than for everyone else. Some kind of temporal anomaly caused SpongeBob to experience weeks, while everyone else only experienced days. This would explain the time discrepancy without requiring anyone to lie. However, the episode provides no evidence for temporal anomalies, and this concept is never mentioned in any other episode. A third theory is that SpongeBob hallucinated most of the episode. When he first realizes everyone is gone, he immediately has a psychological break and imagines weeks passing, when really it was only a day. This would explain why he descended into paranoid delusions so quickly. However, this theory does not account for the physical evidence. The boat is real. The destruction to the houses is real. SpongeBob has an actual driver's license at the end. These things cannot be hallucinated. The truth is that Gone presents a mystery that cannot be adequately explained by the information provided in the episode. An entire city's population disappears simultaneously, vanishes for an extended period, and returns with only a casual explanation that ignores the serious implications of what occurred. The episode shows SpongeBob suffering severe psychological trauma from prolonged isolation, but treats this trauma as comedy rather than addressing it seriously. The logistics of how thousands of people left the city, where they went, how they survived, and how this was organized remain completely unexplained. The time discrepancy between what SpongeBob experienced and what everyone else claims happened is never resolved. The episode ends with Patrick about to experience the same isolation but does not show what happens next. Gone is an episode that presents a deeply disturbing scenario and then refuses to adequately explain it. The mass disappearance of every living creature in an entire city is treated as a casual prank rather than the massive logistical undertaking it would actually require. SpongeBob's descent into madness is played for laughs rather than taken seriously. The episode creates a mystery about how this event was possible and then dismisses that mystery with an explanation that raises more questions than it answers. National No SpongeBob Day remains one of the most unexplained and disturbing events in the entire series, an event that suggests dark implications about how the residents of Bikini Bottom view SpongeBob and what they are willing to do to avoid him. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Spongehenge and the future, where SpongeBob becomes a monument. In the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, there exists an episode that shows the complete destruction of an entire civilization and jumps thousands of years into the future where that civilization is completely gone. This episode is called Spongehenge, and it aired on November 23, 2007. The episode shows SpongeBob being tormented by jellyfish that are attracted to the whistling sound his pores make in extreme wind. To escape the jellyfish, SpongeBob hides in a cave and builds stone statues of himself that make the same whistling sound. When he finally emerges from the cave, he discovers that Bikini Bottom has been buried in sand and apparently abandoned. The episode then jumps 3,000 years into the future, where aliens visit SpongeBob's stone statues as mysterious ancient monuments. The show never explains what happened to Bikini Bottom, how much time actually passed, what happened to SpongeBob, why the wind never stopped, or how an entire civilization could collapse and be forgotten. These mysteries are never addressed in this episode or any future episode of the series. The episode begins with a shot of Bikini Bottom where wind is blowing wildly. A character named Nat says Neptune has stirred up quite a gale tonight and he must be mad about something. A character named Shuby laughs and says that is silly because everyone knows Poseidon is ruler of the undersea. A bag of goulash blows out of Shuby's hand. She says, "Oh, my leftovers." Nat yells no and sobs, asking why, dear Neptune. SpongeBob is shown snoring in bed. The bag of goulash breaks through his window and lands on SpongeBob's face. SpongeBob says, goulash. He opens the window and yells to whoever is out there that they dropped their goulash. He says hello but gets no response. The wind makes music through SpongeBob's pores. SpongeBob notices his pores are whistling in the wind. He jumps outside and the wind continues making music through his body. SpongeBob laughs. A jellyfish comes to SpongeBob. The jellyfish buzzes to the music. SpongeBob says, "Ah." The little critter likes his whistling pores. The jellyfish goes into SpongeBob's head. SpongeBob laughs uncontrollably and says that tickles. He continues laughing until a voice attracts his attention. SpongeBob looks up to see the moon with a real human face on it. The moon yawns and says his shift is over. This opening scene establishes several mysteries. The first mystery is the extreme wind. Nat suggests this wind is caused by Neptune being angry, while Shuby says Poseidon is the ruler of the undersea. This disagreement about which god controls the ocean is never resolved. The wind is strong enough to break through SpongeBob's window and blow objects around. The second mystery is the moon having a human face. The moon is shown as having an actual human face that can talk and yawn. The moon says his shift is over, as if he is an employee or worker whose job is to be the moon. This is never explained or referenced again in the episode. The scene cuts to daytime with the sun having a human face on it as well. The sun says, "Time for work, SpongeBob." SpongeBob tells the jellyfish it is time to go. He takes a deep breath and shoots the jellyfish out from one of the holes in his head. He says it has been real fun, but he has to get to work. The jellyfish follows him. SpongeBob comments on the wind and says, "Quite a wind this morning." The wind blows SpongeBob away. More jellyfish come. SpongeBob asks the jellyfish he calls Sparky if he can tell his friends that SpongeBob does not have time to play right now. The jellyfish tickles SpongeBob and he laughs uncontrollably, begging them to stop. He continues laughing until he lets go of the rocks. SpongeBob gets blown away and lands back in bed. He says he is going to be late. He runs out the door, but jellyfish pick him up. SpongeBob tells them he does not have time to play. He gets blown back. He says he has not been tardy one time in his career as a fry cook and is not going to start today. SpongeBob gets slung out of his home and back. The jellyfish laugh. The door closes on SpongeBob's hands and he screams. His fingers become huge and swollen. The sun having a human face like the moon creates another mystery. Both celestial bodies have human faces and can speak. The sun directly addresses SpongeBob by name and tells him it is time for work. This suggests the sun is aware of SpongeBob specifically and knows his schedule. Throughout the entire rest of the series, the sun and moon are never shown having faces or speaking. This episode treats it as completely normal but never explains why these celestial bodies are sentient beings with human faces. SpongeBob says he needs to call in some help. He tries to use the phone, but his swollen fingers are too big for the buttons. He says his fingers are too big. He dials with his nose and calls the Krusty Krab. "Mr. Krabs answers and says, "Hello, this is the Krusty Krab." SpongeBob says Mr. Krabs. He needs him. Mr. Krabs asks where SpongeBob has been and says customers are blowing in here like nobody's business. The scene shows Nat flying through the door literally and landing on his face, then getting in line. SpongeBob says he is sorry, but these jellyfish do not want him to go to work. Mr. Krabs repeats jellyfish in confusion. SpongeBob explains they are attracted to his whistly holes. Mr. Krabs says he will never understand what SpongeBob just said, but if it is transportation he needs, Mr. Krabs knows just the thing. Mr. Krabs casts a fishing rod which hooks onto SpongeBob by one of his pores. Mr. Krabs says gotcha. He comments that this one is putting up a fight. SpongeBob is shown dragging on the ground. Mr. Krabs says it is fighting too hard and shows SpongeBob getting tossed in the air. Mr. Krabs says if you are going to reel him in, you have to wear him down. He gives SpongeBob a little slack, then yanks. This happens multiple times until Mr. Krabs pulls a beaten-up SpongeBob in. Mr. Krabs says there he is, ready for work. He puts SpongeBob's hat on his head. One by one, SpongeBob's teeth fall out of his mouth. Mr. Krabs tells him to get in there and start pushing out patties. SpongeBob salutes dazedly and says, "Aye, aye, sir." His left arm falls off. This scene shows that the wind situation is affecting the entire city. Customers are literally being blown into the Krusty Krab. The wind is strong enough to drag SpongeBob across the ground and toss him in the air. Mr. Krabs' solution of using a fishing rod to reel SpongeBob in causes significant physical damage. SpongeBob loses his teeth and his arm falls off. The episode treats this severe physical trauma as comedy rather than addressing how SpongeBob could work in this condition. SpongeBob is now in the kitchen and walks over to his grill. He says, "Let's get these patties started right." The wind blows patties onto the walls. SpongeBob says that gives him an idea. He lets all ingredients blow from his hands onto the patties on the walls. SpongeBob says order up while humming. The window opens and sound comes through SpongeBob's pores again. SpongeBob says, "Oh no, they have found him." The jellyfish come in through the chimney towards SpongeBob. SpongeBob says, No, guys, please." He asks if they would mind coming back after business hours because he is trying to work. As the wind continues, the Krusty Krab gets blown off into the sky, leaving only the green floorboards behind. SpongeBob holds onto his spatula in the floorboards as Squidward slides past him in his wooden boat. Mr. Krab steps backward, protecting his cash register. SpongeBob loses his grip on the Krusty Krab floorboards and he is sent launching through the air. SpongeBob is shown landing on Patrick's rock and grabs onto the weather vane, hanging on for dear life as the heavy wind continues blowing. This is the first major indication of how catastrophic the wind situation has become. The wind is now strong enough to completely destroy buildings and blow the entire Krusty Krab into the sky. The restaurant is torn apart and blown away, leaving only the floorboards. Squidward and Mr. Krabs are also shown being blown away, though they are not trying to help SpongeBob. The episode never explains what happens to them after this or how they survive. A weatherman on television says the weather situation is much worse across the country. A reporter named Bob says this does not look like the winds are going to stop anytime soon. The TV reporter gets blown away. Patrick laughs and says fishy go bye-bye. He eats kelp cream as SpongeBob enters and falls. A news anchor named Barbara says, and that is the way it is in your world today. Patrick throws his ice cream cone at the TV and calls it boring. He says he does not want to watch any of this boring stuff and wants to watch something decent. SpongeBob interrupts and says, sorry Patrick, he needs a place to hide from those jellyfish. Patrick asks what jellyfish. SpongeBob explains that ever since the wind started, a sound whistles through his holes that the jellyfish seem to love. Patrick's rock opens and jellyfish come in. Patrick greets them, but a jellyfish stings him. Patrick yells in pain and gets angry. He tells SpongeBob to get out of here. More jellyfish blow Patrick away. Patrick says he is sorry, SpongeBob, but SpongeBob has become a negative influence. SpongeBob laughs and says at least the wind stopped. Jellyfish sting SpongeBob and he runs away. This scene reveals several important facts. The news reports indicate this is a widespread weather event affecting the entire country, not just Bikini Bottom. The reporter says the winds are not going to stop anytime soon, suggesting this is not a temporary storm but an ongoing permanent condition. The reporter himself gets blown away during the broadcast, showing how severe the situation has become. Patrick's reaction shows that SpongeBob's presence now causes immediate danger to anyone near him because the jellyfish will follow and attack. This forces SpongeBob into complete isolation. SpongeBob hides in a cave and says he thinks he lost the jellyfish. He says he guesses he should just stay here where it is safe and quiet and dark. He reassures himself it is okay and he will only hide out here for a second. He says it should not take long. He says behind these rocks, these sedentary, lifeless rocks. The French narrator announces later. The scene shows SpongeBob sitting together with an exact stone replica of himself. SpongeBob says, hey buddy, he just thought he would spruce him up a little. SpongeBob asks, what is that, and says, oh, you do not say. He says, well, guess what? You are my best friend too. SpongeBob says, come on, let's have some fun. He says, look buddy, dinner is ready. He pretends to have tea and asks if his stone friend wants sugar. He asks one lump or two and says his friend can have it all. He puts all the sugar in the tea. SpongeBob says he feels comfortable around his stone friend. He eats sugar and says can he confess something because he knows the stone will understand. He says he has this problem where he seems to attract jellyfish. He laughs and asks how do you handle a thing like that? The stone stays still. SpongeBob agrees and says yeah, he is at a loss too. He says oh barnacles, he is going to be stuck in this cave forever. He sighs. The stone replica's pores make music as the wind blows through them. SpongeBob says, of course, buddy. Brilliant idea. This sequence shows that SpongeBob has been in the cave long enough to carve an entire stone statue of himself and descend into madness from isolation. He is having full conversations with the stone statue and treating it as his best friend. He is eating raw sugar and having pretend tea parties. This level of psychological breakdown suggests he has been isolated for an extended period, but the episode never specifies exactly how long. The French narrator only says later, which could mean days, weeks, months, or even years. SpongeBob takes the stone outside and says, we will see what happens this time. Jellyfish come and SpongeBob says, whoa, here they come. He tells the stone to go get them. The jellyfish hate the music from the stone and buzz over to SpongeBob instead. SpongeBob greets them and asks what they think about his little friend's song. The stone continues to play foul notes. SpongeBob asks if something is wrong. The jellyfish stings SpongeBob and he runs back to the cave. SpongeBob says, he created one stone that uttered a note in a foul key. He says, but if he were to craft another in a different size, and pulls down an extremely complicated equation on a blackboard. He explains the dimensions of that hollow center multiplied by the number of holes may offer another tune, one that could soothe those jellyfish. He asks, but which one is the right size? He says he guesses he will just have to make a bunch of them. The scene shows SpongeBob making 8 musical stones. He says, okay, that should do it. The SpongeBob stones produce melodious notes in the breeze. SpongeBob says, whoa, it actually worked. He says they are finally leaving him alone, and he can go back to work now. He laughs and runs back toward Bikini Bottom, saying, Krusty Krab, here he comes. SpongeBob gasps and stops running. He asks how long was he gone. SpongeBob finds the Krusty Krab partially buried in sand. He yells no repeatedly and cries desperately. This is the most shocking moment of the episode. SpongeBob has been in the cave long enough that when he returns, the Krusty Krab is partially buried in sand and appears to be abandoned. The building is still standing, but is clearly in ruins. SpongeBob's question of how long was he gone suggests he has lost track of time and did not realize how long he was in the cave. The presence of the complicated equation on a blackboard suggests SpongeBob spent significant time calculating and planning the stone statues. The fact that he successfully carved 8 large stone statues by himself indicates months or possibly years of work, but the complete burial of the Krusty Krab in sand suggests geological timescales, not just months or years. The French narrator announces 3,000 years later. 3 aliens and their guide float down to SpongeBob's stone statues. The alien guide says to this day, no one knows why these mysterious statues were created or by whom. One alien takes a picture with its mouth. The guide continues that all they know is the genius of their design has caused the annual migration of jellyfish to their wondrous tune. Jellyfish are shown coming and going in and out of the pores of the stone statues. Off in the distance, SpongeBob laughs as the camera pans into one of the statues' mouths. The episode ends. This ending creates the most significant mystery of the episode. The French narrator explicitly states that 3,000 years have passed since the previous scene. This means the episode jumps from the present day to 3,000 years in the future. In that time, several unexplained events have occurred. First, Bikini Bottom has completely disappeared. The aliens do not recognize the statues as being from any known civilization. They describe them as mysterious and say no one knows who created them or why. This suggests that all knowledge of Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob, and the civilization that existed there has been completely lost. Second, the aliens themselves are never explained. They appear to be tourists or researchers studying ancient monuments. They have a guide who explains the statues to them. This suggests there is a thriving civilization 3,000 years in the future, but it is completely different from the civilization shown in the rest of the series. The aliens do not resemble any species shown in other SpongeBob episodes. They are clearly not fish or sea creatures, but appear to be otherworldly beings. Third, the fate of SpongeBob is ambiguous. The very last shot shows the camera panning into one of the statues' mouths, where SpongeBob's laugh can be heard in the distance. This could mean several things. SpongeBob could still be alive 3,000 years later and living inside the statues. SpongeBob could be dead and his ghost or spirit remains in the statues. The laugh could be a recording or echo from the past. The laugh could be the wind making sounds through the statue that happen to sound like SpongeBob. The episode deliberately does not show SpongeBob, leaving his fate completely unclear. There are numerous mysteries about this episode that are never explained. The first mystery is what caused the permanent wind. The episode begins with wind that is already blowing and never stops. Characters speculate it is caused by Neptune or Poseidon being angry, but this is never confirmed. The wind is strong enough to destroy buildings and blow people away. The wind continues for thousands of years without stopping. This is not a normal weather pattern. The episode never explains what caused this wind, why it specifically affects Bikini Bottom, or why it never ends. The second mystery is why the wind specifically attracts jellyfish to SpongeBob. The wind makes music through SpongeBob's pores, and jellyfish are attracted to this music. But SpongeBob is not the only porous character in the show. Other sponges should produce the same effect. Patrick is porous. Many other sea creatures have holes or openings that should whistle in the wind. But the episode only shows jellyfish being attracted to SpongeBob specifically. The stone statues are also able to produce sounds that attract jellyfish, which suggests it is not something unique to SpongeBob's biology, but rather the specific shape and number of holes. The third mystery is how long SpongeBob was in the cave. The episode shows SpongeBob entering the cave, having a conversation with his first stone statue, and then building 8 more statues. When he emerges, the Krusty Krab is buried in sand. But 3,000 years have not passed yet at this point. The 3,000 years later announcement comes after SpongeBob finds the ruined Krusty Krab. This means SpongeBob was in the cave for some amount of time less than 3,000 years, but more than enough time for the Krusty Krab to be buried in sand. The episode never specifies this time period. The fourth mystery is what happened to everyone else. The episode shows the wind destroying the Krusty Krab and blowing Squidward and Mr. Krabs away. Patrick is shown being blown away by jellyfish, but their ultimate fates are never shown. Did they survive the wind? Did they evacuate Bikini Bottom? Did they die? Did they also hide in caves? When SpongeBob finds the buried Krusty Krab, there is no sign of any other living creatures. The city appears to be completely abandoned, but the episode never shows what happened to cause this abandonment. The fifth mystery is what happened to Bikini Bottom as a civilization. The episode shows that 3,000 years in the future, aliens have no knowledge of who built the statues or why. This means all historical records of Bikini Bottom have been lost. The entire civilization has been forgotten. How did this happen? Did everyone evacuate and never return? Did the wind destroy all buildings and records? Was there some other catastrophic event that destroyed the civilization? The episode provides no information about what caused Bikini Bottom to be completely erased from history. The sixth mystery is how the stone statues survived for 3,000 years. SpongeBob carved these statues out of stone while hiding in a cave. They were apparently left outside near where Bikini Bottom used to be. 3,000 years later, they are still standing and functional. The statues are described as having genius design. They still produce the correct sounds to attract jellyfish during their annual migration. This suggests the statues are incredibly well preserved and exactly where SpongeBob left them. But 3,000 years is an enormous amount of time. How did these statues survive unchanged while the entire civilization around them disappeared? The seventh mystery is SpongeBob's ultimate fate. The laugh heard at the end of the episode suggests SpongeBob may still exist in some form 3,000 years in the future. If SpongeBob is still alive, this means he has lived for at least 3,000 years, which is far beyond any normal lifespan. If SpongeBob died at some point, when did he die? Where is his body? Why is his laugh still audible? The episode deliberately leaves this ambiguous and never clarifies what happened to SpongeBob. The eighth mystery is the nature of the alien civilization. 3,000 years in the future, there are aliens or otherworldly beings visiting the statue site as tourists or researchers. They have a guide who provides information about the statues. This suggests an advanced civilization with tourism, research, and historical preservation. But these aliens do not resemble any species previously shown living in Bikini Bottom. Where did they come from? Are they from another part of the ocean? Are they from space? Did they evolve from species that lived in Bikini Bottom? The episode provides no context for who these beings are or how they came to exist. The ninth mystery is why this episode is never referenced again. Spongehenge shows the complete destruction of Bikini Bottom and jumps 3,000 years into a future where the entire civilization is forgotten. This is one of the most significant events possible. But this episode is never mentioned in any future episode. The next episode takes place in the normal present-day Bikini Bottom with no indication that anything catastrophic happened. The statues are never seen again. The permanent wind is never mentioned again. The episode exists as a standalone story that seemingly contradicts the continuity of the entire rest of the series. Some fans have created theories to explain these mysteries. One theory is that the entire episode is a dream or hallucination. SpongeBob falls asleep at the beginning when the goulash hits his face, and everything that follows is a nightmare. This would explain why the episode is never referenced again and why events return to normal. However, this theory does not account for the opening scene showing other characters discussing the wind before SpongeBob wakes up. Another theory is that the episode shows an alternate timeline or possible future. The events shown are one possible outcome if the wind never stops, but this future is not inevitable. Other episodes take place in a timeline where the wind did eventually stop and Bikini Bottom recovered. However, the episode never suggests this is an alternate timeline and presents events as if they actually happened. A third theory is that the episode is meant to be symbolic rather than literal. The stone statues could represent SpongeBob's legacy and how he will be remembered long after he is gone. The 3,000-year time jump could be metaphorical rather than actual. However, the French narrator explicitly states 3,000 years later, which suggests this is meant to be taken literally. The truth is that Spongehenge presents a mystery about the complete collapse of an entire civilization and refuses to explain what happened. The episode shows permanent catastrophic wind that destroys buildings and forces the population to flee. SpongeBob hides in a cave for an unknown amount of time and emerges to find his city buried in sand. 3,000 years pass, and all knowledge of Bikini Bottom is lost to history. Aliens visit the stone statues as mysterious ancient monuments with no knowledge of their origin. SpongeBob's fate remains ambiguous. The episode jumps thousands of years into the future and shows a completely different world that never addresses any of this in future episodes. Spongehenge remains one of the most unexplained and darkest episodes in the entire series, suggesting a catastrophic end to Bikini Bottom that the show has no interest in explaining or resolving. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Atlantis, Squarepantis, and the Secrets of the Immortal City. In the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, there exists an episode that reveals the existence of an ancient underwater city with technology that is eons ahead of its time, yet provides almost no explanation for how this city came to exist, why it disappeared, or how its impossible technology actually functions. This episode is called Atlantis Squarepantis, and it aired on November 12, 2007. The episode shows SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally discovering half of an ancient amulet that opens a magical path to the lost city of Atlantis. When they arrive, they find a civilization with song-powered vehicles, machines that convert objects into ice cream, devices that shrink people to fight germs, and a million-year-old bubble that was carried billions of light years from another planet. The show never explains where the Atlanteans came from, how they built their technology, why their city became lost, how the amulet actually works, or why Lord Royal Highness deliberately destroys the only way to reach Atlantis at the end of the episode. These mysteries are never addressed in this episode or any future episode of the series. The episode begins with SpongeBob and Patrick blowing bubbles and trying to photograph them before they pop. SpongeBob sings a song explaining that every bubble must someday pop. While blowing a giant bubble, SpongeBob and Patrick get trapped inside it and float into a cave. The bubble is popped by a jagged point of half a broken amulet. Patrick asks what it is and says it looks really old. SpongeBob reads text on the amulet that says Antis. Patrick says Atlantis Squarepantis and suggests it probably belonged to SpongeBob's ancient ancestors. He tells SpongeBob this is the ancient crest of his ancestors and his birthright. SpongeBob suggests they take it to the Bikini Bottom Museum because they will know what it is. This opening creates the first mystery. The amulet has text that says Antis, which Patrick interprets as being related to SpongeBob's family name Squarepantis. The amulet is described as looking really old and is called the ancient crest of SpongeBob's ancestors. But the episode never explains why an amulet from the lost city of Atlantis would have any connection to SpongeBob's family specifically. Patrick's interpretation that it belonged to SpongeBob's ancestors is never confirmed or denied. The show does not clarify whether this is just Patrick being foolish or if there is actually some connection between SpongeBob's family and Atlantis. At the museum, Squidward is admiring a painting called Neptune's Ascension. He says it is the only surviving painting from the great lost city of Atlantis. SpongeBob and Patrick run in excitedly, knocking Squidward over. Squidward asks what they are doing with the amulet of Atlantis. He initially thinks they are trying to steal it. Then he realizes they found the missing half of the Atlantean amulet. SpongeBob asks what an Atlantean omelet is. Squidward corrects him and says amulet, not omelet. He says it is the key to untold riches. Mr. Krabs appears and asks if somebody said untold riches. Squidward explains that in Atlantis, the streets are lined with gold and the street lamps are made with diamonds. Mr. Krabs gets excited about diamond light bulbs. Squidward explains that for reasons unknown, this great city disappeared one day, but no ruins were ever found. He says all the inventions that people take for granted were given to them by the Atlanteans. He says their advances in art, financial wealth, and weaponry were eons ahead of their time. This establishes several critical facts that are never explained. First, Atlantis is described as a great lost city that disappeared one day for reasons unknown. The episode never reveals what caused Atlantis to disappear or why it became lost. Second, no ruins were ever found, which suggests the entire city vanished without a trace. Third, all modern inventions came from the Atlanteans. This means the entire civilization of Bikini Bottom is built on Atlantean technology, but the episode never explains how this knowledge was transferred or preserved. Fourth, Atlantean advances were eons ahead of their time, which raises the question of how such advanced technology developed in an underwater city. SpongeBob asks why a bubble is painted on the mural. Squidward explains that is the oldest living bubble. SpongeBob says the oldest living bubble alive and shows Patrick. Patrick says this is the most beautiful bubble he has ever seen. Squidward clarifies that is just a painting and the real bubble lives in Atlantis. Sandy appears and mentions science. She asks what the hubbub is about. Squidward explains these two found the missing half of the amulet. Sandy says legend says that when the two halves are joined, the path to Atlantis is opened. She tells them to hitch the two halves together. Squidward connects the two halves and a bright light activates. A bus drops from the ceiling. Squidward asks if the magical path to Atlantis is a van. Mr. Krabs comments on the hot rod flames. A coin spins and attaches itself to the bus. The door opens. The amulet creates another mystery. When the two halves are connected, it somehow causes a bus to materialize from thin air and drop from the ceiling. The episode never explains how the amulet works, why joining the two pieces creates a vehicle, where the bus came from, or what kind of magic or technology allows this to happen. The bus is described as the magical path to Atlantis, but nothing about how this magic functions is ever clarified. They enter the bus and a robot greets them. The robot says this is a non-stop trip and tells them to take a seat and relax. Mr. Krabs tries to find loose change. The robot announces they lack the fuel needed for forward motion. They all push the bus to a gas station. Mr. Krabs tries to fill it with gas but cannot find the gas tank. The robot explains that Atlanteans find the use of fossil fuels to be counterintuitive and have developed an alternative source they call song. The robot says the engine of this vessel is fueled by song. The more they sing of their desires, the closer to Atlantis they will get. Squidward asks if that makes any sense. SpongeBob says no, but he is game for singing any day. SpongeBob starts singing, and the van rises up and floats in midair. When he sings off-key, the van crashes down. When he sings clearly, the van rises up high and makes a hole in the roof. This introduces the most significant technological mystery of the episode. The bus is powered by singing. This is presented as Atlantean technology that uses song as an energy source. The robot explains this is an alternative to fossil fuels that the Atlanteans developed. But the episode never explains how this is possible. How does singing create energy? How does the quality of the singing affect the amount of power generated? How does a vehicle convert sound waves into propulsion? This technology violates all known laws of physics but is treated as normal Atlantean science. Everyone sings about their desires. Mr. Krabs sings about money. Plankton sings about weapons. Sandy sings about science. Squidward sings about art. Patrick tries to sing but does not know what he likes. The robot warns they have run out of song fuel. They all scream until Squidward notices they have arrived at Atlantis. The bus crashes through a city wall. They see that Atlantis has futuristic blue and purple buildings with spires and bubbles. They emerge from the bus, and Squidward comments they have already messed up someone's topiary garden. Lord Royal Highness appears and says he has been expecting them. He introduces himself and says his friends call him LRH. He offers to give them a grand tour of the Atlantean fortress and says he is glad they are all here. The fact that LRH was expecting them creates another mystery. He specifically says he has been expecting them, which suggests he knew they were coming. But the episode never explains how he knew. Did the amulet send a signal when it was joined? Can LRH see the future? Did he somehow know that someone would eventually find the amulet and use it? This foreknowledge is never explained. LRH gives them a tour and explains that for centuries, Atlanteans spent their talents and energy building sophisticated weaponry to defend themselves from invaders. He says they abandoned the idea of warfare long ago, and now all the weapons gather dust behind a locked door as an example of what must be done to live in harmony with all creatures. Plankton sneaks away to find the weapons. LRH shows Mr. Krabs the Hall of Treasure and explains they abandoned their obsession with wealth to focus on the pursuit of knowledge. He tells Mr. Krabs to help himself to as much as his pockets can carry. Mr. Krabs sings about money and fills his pockets with treasure. This reveals important information about Atlantean history, but raises more questions. The Atlanteans apparently had enemies at some point and built advanced weapons for defense, but the episode never identifies who these enemies were or why Atlanteans needed to defend themselves. The Atlanteans then underwent a philosophical transformation where they abandoned warfare and the pursuit of wealth in favor of knowledge. But what caused this transformation? How long ago did it happen? The episode suggests this occurred in the distant past, but provides no details about Atlantean history or culture. Sandy asks to see the Atlantean scientific achievements. LRH shows her the Hall of Science and describes it as the combination of all their technology. He shows them a biomass converting device that can take any household object and turn it into ice cream. Sandy asks what else it can turn things into. LRH admits it can only turn things into ice cream, and they have not worked out that bug yet. He shows them another device that allows the user to be broken down to nanostature to battle germs hand-to-hand. SpongeBob accidentally activates the machine and disappears. Patrick follows to help him. Squidward also gets pulled in. They end up in an 8-bit video game world fighting germs inside someone's nose. Sandy enters the game to save them. The scientific devices create more mysteries. The biomass converting device can transform any object into ice cream, but only ice cream. This suggests incomplete or malfunctioning technology. Why would the Atlanteans build a machine that only makes ice cream? Was it supposed to convert objects into any substance but failed? The shrinking machine that allows people to fight germs is even more puzzling. This requires breaking down a person's molecules into data, storing that data on computer tapes, reassembling the person on a much smaller scale, and then returning them to normal size afterward. This is technology that exceeds anything shown anywhere else in the series, but the episode treats it as a routine Atlantean invention and never explains how such impossible technology was created. LRH shows Squidward the Hall of Arts. He asks what is art, and Squidward gives a textbook definition. LRH says, not even close, and explains that art is what happens when you learn to dream. He gives SpongeBob a blue paintbrush and tells him to dream a little. SpongeBob touches a wall with the brush and the paint creates his house door. LRH opens the door to reveal the Hall of Arts. Squidward sees paintings he can actually step into and become part of. He sings about art and decides to stay in Atlantis, inspiring the artists. LRH explains he has to prepare for dinner and leaves SpongeBob and Patrick alone with the oldest living bubble. The magic paintbrush creates living doors and the ability to step into paintings. This is presented as Atlantean art technology but is never explained. How does paint create functional doorways? How can someone physically enter a two-dimensional painting? What kind of technology or magic allows this? The episode treats these impossibilities as normal features of Atlantis. LRH tells SpongeBob and Patrick that the bubble is over 1 million years old. He explains it was brought here when the first Atlanteans colonized this place. He says it was deftly hand-carried over billions of light years from their home planet. He describes it as their people's most beloved and treasured ancient relic. SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally pop the bubble while taking a photograph. At dinner, LRH reveals that was just a prop for tourists and shows them the real bubble in a bottle. Patrick takes a picture with flash photography and pops the real bubble. LRH becomes furious and summons the royal guard to seize them. The bubble reveals the most significant mystery about Atlantean origins. LRH explicitly states that Atlanteans colonized this place and brought the bubble from their home planet. This means Atlanteans are not native to Earth or the ocean. They came from another planet billions of light years away, but the episode never explains where this home planet was, why Atlanteans left, how they traveled billions of light years, or when they arrived. The bubble being 1 million years old suggests Atlanteans have been in this location for at least that long. But how did they get here? What method of space travel did they use? Why did they settle underwater? None of this is explained. The gang escapes from the guards with Sandy using them as weapons. They run outside where Plankton has taken control of a giant tank. Plankton laughs diabolically and says he has commandeered the most powerful weapon in the Atlantean arsenal. He tries to fire the weapon, but it shoots ice cream instead of missiles. Plankton realizes it is an oversized ice cream maker. LRH captures Plankton and says this talking speck will make a fantastic replacement for the bubble. Plankton gets put in a bottle cage as the new tourist attraction. The weapons being ice cream makers creates another mystery. The Atlanteans supposedly built the most advanced weaponry to defend themselves from invaders, but the weapon Plankton finds only makes ice cream. Were all the Atlantean weapons converted into ice cream makers when they abandoned warfare? Or were they always ice cream makers and the idea of advanced weaponry was exaggerated? The episode suggests the Atlanteans deliberately made their weapons harmless, but never explains how or why. As the gang leaves, LRH takes the amulet off the van and gives it to a guard. He tells the guard to dispose of this quickly because they cannot survive anymore visitors like these. The guard salutes and runs to the dumpster and throws the amulet away. LRH waves goodbye and says he thought sponges were supposed to make life easier. This ending creates the final and perhaps most important mystery. LRH deliberately destroys the amulet, which is the only way to reach Atlantis. He specifically says they cannot survive any more visitors, which suggests this visit caused significant problems. But Atlantis appears undamaged, and the only thing that was destroyed was the bubble, which LRH admitted was not that important to him since he immediately replaced it with Plankton. Why would one destroyed bubble motivate LRH to permanently cut off Atlantis from the outside world? What does he mean by cannot survive more visitors? This suggests there is something fragile or vulnerable about Atlantis that the episode never explains. There are numerous mysteries about this episode that are never explained. The first mystery is the origin of the Atlanteans. LRH explicitly states they came from another planet billions of light years away and colonized this location. But where did they come from? How did they travel billions of light years? What technology allowed space travel on that scale? Why did they leave their home planet? Why did they choose to settle underwater on Earth? The episode provides no answers to any of these questions. The second mystery is how Atlantis became lost. Squidward states that for reasons unknown, Atlantis disappeared one day and no ruins were ever found. This suggests the city vanished suddenly and completely. But what caused this disappearance? Did the Atlanteans deliberately hide their city? Was there a disaster? Did they use some kind of cloaking technology? The episode never clarifies what made Atlantis lost or why it remained lost for so long. The third mystery is the amulet itself. The amulet can open a magical path to Atlantis by manifesting a bus that drops from the ceiling. But how does the amulet work? What kind of technology or magic powers it? Why was it split in half? Who split it and when? How did one half end up in a cave near Bikini Bottom while the other half remained in the museum? The episode suggests the amulet is ancient but provides no information about its creation or purpose. The fourth mystery is Atlantean technology. The episode shows song-powered vehicles, biomass converters that make ice cream, shrinking machines that let people fight germs, magic paintbrushes that create doorways, paintings you can enter, and weapons that were converted to ice cream makers. All of this technology is described as being eons ahead of its time. But how did the Atlanteans develop such impossible technology? The episode never shows any Atlantean scientists or explains the principles behind their inventions. The fifth mystery is the transfer of knowledge. Squidward states that all inventions in Bikini Bottom came from the Atlanteans. This means Atlantean knowledge somehow spread to the rest of the underwater world despite Atlantis being lost. But how did this knowledge transfer occur? When did it happen? If Atlantis has been lost for centuries with no ruins ever found, how did anyone learn about Atlantean technology? Did the Atlanteans share their knowledge before disappearing? The episode never addresses this. The sixth mystery is the oldest living bubble. This bubble is 1 million years old and was brought from another planet billions of light years away. But how has a bubble survived for 1 million years? Bubbles normally pop quickly due to their fragile nature. What keeps this bubble from popping? Is it made of some special material? Does it require specific conditions to survive? The fact that it pops immediately when photographed with a flash suggests it is still fragile like a normal bubble, which makes its survival even more inexplicable. The seventh mystery is why LRH destroys the amulet. At the end of the episode, LRH deliberately throws the amulet in the trash to prevent future visitors. He says they cannot survive any more visitors like these. But why? The gang caused minimal damage and actually provided a new attraction by leaving Plankton behind. What about this visit was so problematic that LRH decided to permanently isolate Atlantis? This suggests something about outside visitors threatens Atlantis, but the episode never explains what that threat is. The eighth mystery is the long-term implications. By destroying the amulet, LRH has made Atlantis impossible to reach again. This means all the advanced technology, knowledge, and culture of Atlantis is now permanently sealed off from the rest of the world. But the episode treats this as a happy ending where everyone goes home. Nobody questions LRH's decision or considers what is lost by cutting off access to Atlantis. The show never addresses what this means for the future. The ninth mystery is why this episode is never referenced again. Atlantis Squarepantis reveals that an ancient alien civilization with impossible technology exists underwater and has influenced all modern civilization. But this is never mentioned in any future episode. Squidward never talks about his time inspiring Atlantean artists. Sandy never references the incredible scientific devices she saw. Mr. Krabs never mentions the Hall of Treasure. The existence of Atlantis has no impact on the rest of the series. The truth is that Atlantis Squarepantis presents a mystery about an ancient alien civilization with technology eons ahead of its time, and provides almost no explanation for how this civilization works. The episode reveals that Atlanteans came from another planet billions of light years away, developed impossible technology, influenced all modern civilization, and then disappeared for unknown reasons. The path to Atlantis can only be opened with an ancient amulet that manifests a song-powered bus. When visitors finally reach Atlantis, they find a city with devices that violate physics, a million-year-old bubble from another planet, and a leader who deliberately destroys the only way to return because he cannot survive more visitors. The episode treats all of this as straightforward adventure and never explores the enormous implications of what it reveals. Atlantis Squarepantis remains one of the most unexplained episodes in the series, presenting an alien civilization with reality-defying technology and then sealing it away forever without explanation. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Krabby Patty Creature Feature and the Patty Zombie Apocalypse. In the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, there exists an episode that shows a catastrophic biological outbreak that transforms almost every citizen of Bikini Bottom into zombie-like creatures within minutes, yet provides almost no explanation for how this transformation works, what causes it, why it spreads so rapidly, or how a simple food substance can completely rewrite living biology. This episode is called Krabby Patty Creature Feature, and it aired on October 21, 2017. The episode shows Mr. Krabs revealing a secret laboratory underneath the Krusty Krab where he has been experimenting on food. Sandy creates a new type of Krabby Patty using molecular gastronomy. When customers eat these new patties, they transform into mindless zombie monsters that force others to eat them, spreading the infection across the entire city within moments. SpongeBob discovers that Chum reverses the transformation. The show never explains how the secret patties cause biological mutations, why they create a compulsion to infect others, how the transformation spreads so quickly, why Chum specifically cures it when Mr. Krabs built the secret laboratory, or how such a dangerous outbreak is never referenced again. These mysteries are never addressed in this episode or any future episode of the series. The episode begins at the Krusty Krab with SpongeBob flipping two Krabby Patties. They flop into his head, and he takes a deep breath and cooks them in a thought cloud above him. He takes the Krabby Patties out of the thought cloud and announces order is up. Squidward grumbles as SpongeBob sets the 2 Krabby Patties down. Mr. Krabs sighs and says another pair of perfect patties. He tells Squidward to hand them over. SpongeBob tells him to wait and puts a sesame seed on the bun. The seed sparkles. SpongeBob says, okay, now they are perfect. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs laugh and make various silly faces at the same time. Mr. Krabs stops laughing and says enough. He says everybody gets it, their patties are perfect. He tells them to keep the orders coming. He sings to himself as he delivers the food to 2 hipster customers. He announces orders up, 2 Krabby Patties. The first hipster fish says he does not know. Mr. Krabs asks if something is wrong with the patties. The hipster says no, they just want something different. The second hipster says yeah, something new. Both hipsters repeatedly say the word new. Another customer named Fred says they want something new too. All the customers start chanting for something new. This opening establishes that the standard Krabby Patty is considered perfect by Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob. The customers demanding something new suggests they have become bored with perfection. This customer dissatisfaction will motivate Mr. Krabs to reveal his secret experiments. The episode never explains how long customers have been wanting something new or whether this discontent is unusual. Mr. Krabs says new and chuckles. He says they have been waiting to test their new menu. He asks if they would like to be the first to try it. The second hipster says, yeah, they like being first. Mr. Krabs runs into the kitchen and opens the freezer door. He tells SpongeBob to come with him and grabs SpongeBob and drags him into the freezer. The freezer closes its door, and like an elevator, it takes them downstairs into the basement. Mr. Krabs has built a secret laboratory underneath his restaurant. SpongeBob asks, what is this place? Mr. Krabs says it is his secret lab where he experiments on food. SpongeBob says, this looks like madness. Mr. Krabs asks if he thinks this is mad and says, wait until he sees something. He pulls a curtain and reveals a large magnifying glass with a large eye looking through it. SpongeBob yells. The large eye turns out to be Sandy's eye. Sandy says, howdy SpongeBob, and pushes the magnifying glass up. This reveals the first major mystery. Mr. Krabs has built an entire secret laboratory underneath the Krusty Krab. The freezer functions as an elevator that descends into this basement lab. SpongeBob has never seen this laboratory before, which means Mr. Krabs has kept it completely secret from his employees. The episode never explains when this laboratory was built, how long it has been there, how Mr. Krabs constructed it without anyone noticing, or what other experiments he has conducted in this lab. Mr. Krabs says he experiments on food, which suggests he has been doing this for an extended period. But the show provides no information about the history of this facility or previous experiments. SpongeBob asks Sandy what she is doing down here. Sandy says she is moonlighting as a molecular gastronomist. SpongeBob asks what a Maladoan, a gas, a Wuddleist is. Sandy pulls down a diagram of an algebraic expression that includes a burger, French fries, a double helix, and the pi symbol. She explains that Eugene is paying her to science up his menu. Mr. Krabs says he is in a hurry and mentions a special project. Sandy says it is a work in process. Sandy grabs a pipette and squeezes a drop of orange liquid into a container. This causes it to grow into a double helix shape. Eventually, it forms an orange floating glowing Krabby Patty. Sandy says there it is, the new patty. This creates the second major mystery. Sandy has been secretly working for Mr. Krabs as a molecular gastronomist. The diagram she shows includes a double helix, which represents DNA or genetic material. This suggests Sandy has been manipulating the genetic structure of food. The orange liquid she uses causes rapid growth into a double helix shape before forming a glowing orange patty. The episode never explains what this orange liquid is, how Sandy created it, what molecular or genetic changes she made, or why the patty glows. The fact that it forms a double helix suggests it contains living genetic material, but the nature of this material is never clarified. SpongeBob protests and says, wait, no, you cannot improve the Krabby Patty. He says it is perfect perfection that cannot be perfected upon. He puts a normal Krabby Patty on top of the orange glowing Krabby Patty. Mr. Krabs says, yeah, right, it stands the test of time. He pushes the normal Krabby Patty into SpongeBob's head. He tells Sandy to make him 200 of these pronto. The scene changes back to the dining room. Mr. Krabs serves the hipster fish 2 brand new patties. The hipster fish eat the new secret patties. Sandy comes out with a load of secret patties in a cart. She tells everyone to step right up and get new improved patties. The customers pile on top of Sandy and each get a secret patty. The episode shows that Sandy is able to rapidly produce 200 secret patties. This mass production suggests she has refined the process and can create the orange liquid in large quantities. But how she scales up production so quickly is never explained. The fact that Mr. Krabs was already planning to test these patties suggests this was not a spontaneous experiment, but a deliberate product development. The French narrator announces many secret patties later. The second hipster fish is texting on his phone and says he is leaving a good review. A customer says the patties are so tasty. Mr. Krabs eats a secret patty and says it is a little bit different but tastes familiar. He eats the secret patty whole, burps, and feels sick. He says that was not familiar and burps again. SpongeBob asks if he is feeling okay because there are sesame seeds growing out of his back. Mr. Krabs groans as sesame seeds grow out of his back. His head mutates into a bun. His torso becomes a patty with lettuce. His claws grow out of the top bun. 2 crab feet grow out of the bottom bun. Mr. Krabs has completely turned into a Krabby Patty zombie monster and moans like a zombie. This is the moment the transformation begins. The physical changes happen rapidly and are extremely detailed. Sesame seeds grow from Mr. Krabs' body. His head transforms into a bun. His torso restructures into a patty with lettuce. His entire body is reorganized to resemble a Krabby Patty, while maintaining some of his original features like his claws and feet. This transformation represents a complete biological restructuring that happens within seconds. The episode never explains how eating a patty can cause such rapid and extreme physical changes. How does consumed food rewrite the biology of the eater? How can a crab's body transform into bread, meat, and vegetables while still being alive and mobile? SpongeBob asks, what is going on in horror? Sandy says her stomach is growling and she never should have eaten 4. She feels something growing in her. Her head becomes a bun. Her hands grow bigger and her entire body inside her suit rips and mutates into a Krabby Patty zombie. She growls. SpongeBob says the new patties are making everyone change. Soon, all of the customers, even Squidward, who ate a secret patty, mutate into Krabby Patty zombies. Squidward's shirt rips and he mutates into a Krabby Patty zombie monster. SpongeBob says he has to get out of here and retreats into the kitchen. The transformation spreads to everyone who ate the secret patties. Each person undergoes the same type of mutation, where their body restructures into a Krabby Patty shape while maintaining mobility and some original features. The transformation appears to be automatic once the patty is consumed and digested. The episode shows that eating multiple patties like Sandy did causes the transformation to happen faster, suggesting a dose-dependent effect. But how the patties cause this uniform transformation across completely different species is never explained. A customer named Dave sees that someone has eaten a secret patty and knows what the side effects are. He says maybe he will pass on this patty and throws it in the trash can. One Krabby Patty zombie grabs part of his body and stuffs it into Dave's mouth and forces it down his throat. Dave feels sick and mutates into a Krabby Patty zombie. He says, "Bite my buns." The Krabby Patty zombies march out of the Krusty Krab and begin to wreak havoc across Bikini Bottom. This reveals the third major mystery. The transformed individuals have a compulsion to force others to eat them. The zombies can tear pieces of their own bodies off and force feed them to others. When someone eats part of a zombie, they also transform. This creates a spreading infection that goes beyond the original secret patties. The episode never explains why the transformation creates this behavioral compulsion. Why do the zombies want to spread the infection? Are they conscious or just driven by instinct? The fact that they can speak simple phrases like "eat us" suggests some level of awareness, but their behavior is mindless and repetitive. Norton is whistling until he bumps into a Krabby Patty zombie. He goes to touch it, but it comes to life. The zombie says, "Eat us." Norton screams and the Krabby Patty zombie leaps into his throat and they both fuse into one zombie. Patrick is eating an ice cream cone as Krabby Patty zombies sneak up behind him. They say, "Eat us." Patrick eats one of the zombified hipster fish. The zombified hipster fish moans and leaves. Patrick then mutates into a Krabby Patty zombie. This scene shows 2 important details. First, a zombie can leap directly into someone's throat and fuse with them. Second, Patrick eats an entire zombie rather than being force-fed, but still transforms. This suggests the transformation can spread through any consumption of the mutated tissue. The hipster fish that Patrick ate is shown leaving after being partially consumed, which means the zombies can survive being eaten and remain mobile. The transformation spreads rapidly through Bikini Bottom. Bubble Bass eats a pickle from Mr. Krabs' zombified body and mutates into a giant Krabby Patty zombie. Several Krabby Patty zombies shake the Krusty Krab sign where Debbie Reckitt and her children are hiding. Her son Ryan falls off and multiple zombies try to force feed him. Ryan initially refuses, but then eats part of a zombie and mutates. The French narrator announces moments later. Bikini Bottom is shown as completely burned down from the Krabby Patty zombie invasion. This reveals the 4th major mystery. The French narrator specifically states that only moments have passed, yet Bikini Bottom is completely burned down. The entire city has been reduced to ruins in what appears to be minutes. The episode never explains how the zombie invasion caused such catastrophic destruction so quickly. Did the zombies deliberately burn buildings? Was the destruction a side effect of the chaos? How did structures burn underwater? The scale and speed of destruction suggests something more than simple zombie behavior, but no explanation is provided. Perch Perkins is reporting live from the Krusty Krab. He says he is one of the 3 people still unaffected by this rabid patty pandemonium. He goes to the Krusty Krab dumpster and says the second unaffected person is in this dumpster. SpongeBob comes out and asks how Perch knew he was in there. Perch explains he was napping in the dumpster when SpongeBob snuck in. Squidward appears and tries to force feed Perch. Perch asks who the third person not affected is. While being forced to eat part of Squidward, Perch says through his air bubble that it is Plankton. SpongeBob says Plankton, the chum bucket, and runs out. This confirms that only 3 individuals out of the entire population of Bikini Bottom have not been infected. SpongeBob, Perch Perkins, and Plankton are the sole survivors. This means the infection spread to thousands of residents within moments. The episode never explains how the infection spread so efficiently or why these 3 specific individuals were able to avoid it. SpongeBob runs to the chum bucket and barricades the door. Plankton asks what he is doing and how customers are supposed to get in. SpongeBob explains those are not customers. They are Krabby Patty zombie monsters forcing everybody to eat them. He says they are the last 2 survivors. Plankton says he will believe it when he sees it. The Krabby Patty zombies break through the boards. Plankton says he believes it. The zombies break through the front door. They stuff some of their bodies into Karen's hard drive, and her screen turns into a Krabby Patty. Karen says, "Consume me." Mrs. Puff grabs Plankton and rubs him on her zombified body. Plankton mutates into a Krabby Patty zombie. This shows that even machines can be infected. Karen is a computer, yet she becomes infected when zombie tissue is stuffed into her hard drive. Her screen transforms to display a Krabby Patty image, and she adopts the same behavioral compulsion as the organic zombies. This suggests the infection can affect non-biological systems. But how can a food-based biological transformation affect a computer? The episode never addresses this impossibility. SpongeBob is now the last remaining survivor. He grabs 2 sporks to defend himself. The zombies stop and look at each other in confusion, then resume closing in. SpongeBob climbs on bags of chum using the sporks. One spork rips open a bag, causing chum to fall into Patrick's mouth. Patrick eats the chum and spits the secret patty out, reverting to normal. Patrick says he feels better. SpongeBob realizes that chum is the cure. Patrick then eats the secret patty again and transforms back into a zombie. This is the discovery of the cure. Chum immediately reverses the transformation. When Patrick eats chum, he spits out the secret patty and returns to normal. This suggests the chum forces the body to expel the mutated tissue and revert to original form. But the episode never explains why chum specifically has this effect. What is in chum that counteracts the mutagenic properties of the secret patties? How does it reverse such extreme biological changes instantly? Chum is described throughout the series as disgusting and undesirable food made from fish parts. But what chemical or biological property gives it the ability to cure this transformation? SpongeBob begins distributing chum to the zombies. Each zombie that eats chum vomits out the secret patty and returns to normal. SpongeBob eventually cures all the zombies, including Sandy, Perch Perkins, Squidward, Bubble Bass, and Mrs. Puff. He rips open a bag and shoots chum into the mouths of the last remaining zombies. All of the Krabby Patty zombies spit out the secret patties and return to their normal selves. The scene transitions to later, when they all feel sick after what happened to them. Squidward says his cranium hurts. Bubble Bass says he told himself he would never eat at the chum bucket. Mr. Krabs says so much for lab-grown patties. The aftermath shows everyone has returned to normal, but feels sick from the experience. They remember what happened to them, which means they were conscious during their time as zombies. But the episode never explores what it was like to be transformed or what the zombies were thinking during the outbreak. The casual way everyone recovers suggests this traumatic experience of having their bodies completely restructured will have no lasting effects. SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs that some things do not need scientific re-engineering to be delicious. He draws and forms a Krabby Patty in midair and says the original Krabby Patty is perfect just the way it is. The second hipster fish says after all that, a good old vintage Krabby Patty sounds pretty good. The first hipster agrees and says vintage Krabby Patties rule. Mr. Krabs says they are right and announces that for the next 3 minutes, all vintage Krabby Patties are double the price. Everyone cheers and runs out of the chum bucket back to the Krusty Krab. Plankton asks who is going to clean up this mess. The screen is about to close when zombified Patrick stops it and grabs part of his body. He shows it to the viewer and says, "Have some." He laughs as the screen turns black. The ending reveals that Patrick is still a zombie. Despite SpongeBob curing everyone with chum, Patrick somehow remained in zombie form or transformed again. This creates a final mystery about whether the cure is permanent or if individuals can be reinfected. The fact that Patrick directly addresses the viewer and tries to infect them breaks the fourth wall and suggests the zombie outbreak may not be fully contained. There are numerous mysteries about this episode that are never explained. The first mystery is the secret laboratory under the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs has built an entire underground facility for food experimentation. The freezer functions as an elevator to access this lab. SpongeBob, who works at the restaurant daily, had no knowledge of this laboratory. When was this laboratory built? How long has Mr. Krabs been conducting food experiments? What other experiments has he done before creating the secret patties? The episode suggests this has been going on for some time, but provides no history or context. The second mystery is Sandy's involvement. Sandy is working as a molecular gastronomist and being paid by Mr. Krabs to science up his menu. This appears to be an established arrangement, not a new partnership. How long has Sandy been working in this lab? Why did she agree to experiment on food? Sandy is typically portrayed as a responsible scientist, but she creates a dangerous mutagen with no apparent safety testing. The episode never addresses why Sandy would engage in such reckless experimentation. The third mystery is the secret patty formula itself. Sandy creates the patty using an orange liquid that forms a double helix before becoming a glowing orange patty. The double helix imagery suggests genetic engineering, but what is this orange liquid? What genetic material does it contain? How did Sandy create a substance that can rewrite living biology? The glowing orange color and floating properties suggest unusual properties, but these are never explained. The fourth mystery is how the transformation works. When someone eats a secret patty, their entire body restructures within seconds into a Krabby Patty shape. Bones, organs, skin, and tissue all transform into bread, meat, lettuce, and other food components. This transformation crosses species, SET, crabs, squirrels, fish, and starfish all transform the same way. How does consumed food rewrite biology so completely and uniformly? What biological mechanism allows this? The speed and consistency of transformation suggests something beyond normal biological processes. The fifth mystery is the zombie behavior. The transformed individuals compel others to eat them and spread the infection. They can tear off pieces of their own bodies to force feed others. They speak simple phrases and work together to attack uninfected individuals. Why does the transformation create this behavioral compulsion? Are the zombies conscious or driven by instinct? The episode never clarifies their mental state or explains the source of their coordinated behavior. The sixth mystery is how the infection spreads so rapidly. Within moments, the entire population of Bikini Bottom is infected. The city is completely burned down and reduced to ruins. Only 3 individuals remain uninfected. How did the infection spread so efficiently? The zombies move slowly and methodically, yet somehow infected thousands of people in minutes. What allowed such rapid transmission? The seventh mystery is why chum cures the transformation. When zombies eat chum, they immediately vomit out the secret patty tissue and revert to normal form. The cure is instant and appears completely effective. But what property of chum reverses the transformation? Chum is made from ground fish parts. How does this specific food substance counteract the mutagenic effects of the secret patties? The episode never explores the chemical or biological basis of the cure. The eighth mystery is why this episode is never referenced again. Krabby Patty creature feature shows almost the entire population being transformed into zombies and the city being destroyed. But this catastrophic outbreak has no impact on future episodes. Mr. Krabs continues using his secret laboratory. Sandy continues her scientific work. Nobody discusses the trauma of being transformed or having their biology completely restructured. The episode exists as a standalone story with no lasting consequences. The truth is that Krabby Patty creature feature presents a mystery about biological transformation that violates all known science and provides almost no explanation for how it works. The episode reveals Mr. Krabs has been secretly experimenting on food in an underground laboratory. Sandy creates patties that transform anyone who eats them into zombie creatures through an unknown mechanism. The infection spreads rapidly through Bikini Bottom, causing complete societal collapse within moments. SpongeBob discovers that chum reverses the transformation through an equally unexplained process. The outbreak is resolved quickly and never mentioned again. Krabby Patty creature feature remains one of the most scientifically impossible episodes in the series, showing complete biological restructuring and viral spread without any explanation of the underlying mechanisms. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.